Chapter 769. His body was still a little uncomfortable. Lin Yuan hadn't controlled a human body for a long time. Even if he had a puppet body that looked like a human, it couldn't be compared to a real human. Simply put, the human body is the hardest thing in the world, a precise instrument. Lin Yuan only needed a thought to control the puppet's body to make the corresponding movements. Although controlling the human body is also a matter of a thought, one must consider the adaptability of the body itself. Excessive movements are easy to cause injuries such as sprains, dislocations, and other injuries. Without hands, the puppet body wouldn't feel pain. At most, it would have one less means of fighting. But without hands, a human would die on the spot due to excessive bleeding. However, this kind of discomfort wasn't purely because of Lin Yuan's body. Then, I will listen to your last wish in this world. Lin Yuan sat upright in front of the dressing table. His facial expression returned to its calm as water. Believers offering their bodies for the gods to descend didn't mean that the gods didn't have to pay a price. Otherwise, the deities in his previous life wouldn't have been banished to the mortal world. It wouldn't have been the cruelest punishment from the heavenly court. In order to perfectly control the body, one had to first fulfill the last wish of the person who was willing to offer their body. Usually, this kind of wish wasn't easy. If this wish couldn't be fulfilled, the body would produce a strong repulsive force and expel the deity who possessed the body. For people like Lin Yuan, it was fine. At most, his divine thoughts would be damaged to a certain extent. He would then return to his body to recuperate. However, those deities whose bodies were killed by the heavenly court and whose souls were banished to the mortal world didn't have such good luck. The best outcome was probably to become a wandering ghost that couldn't be reincarnated. Some even had their souls scattered. The omniscient and omnipotent existence in the West in his previous life was no exception. It was just that he was more cunning. He would cultivate fanatics who were willing to sacrifice everything for the gods. For these fanatics, being able to offer their bodies to the gods they believed in was a supreme honor. Why would they make such an excessive request? Unfortunately, this girl wasn't a fanatic of Lin Yuan. She offered her body for Lin Yuan to descend. It could be seen as a transaction. Even ants drag out their lives, let alone humans. If it wasn't for the impending despair, how could this girl be willing to become Lin Yuan's flesh raft? Kill him, kill them all? The person in the mirror was no longer in sync with Lin Yuan. Instead, he roared with a twisted and ferocious expression. As soon as the voice fell, the person in the mirror suddenly collapsed. When it reassembled, it had already changed into a calm face like Lin Yuan's, as if everything that had just happened was just a fantasy. At the same time, Lin Yuan felt a pain in his right hand. When he lifted his sleeve, he saw a hideous wound that was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood was constantly flowing out. The healing speed of the wound was very slow. Lin Yuan only needed a glance to make a judgment. Such a wound would take at least 10 days to completely heal. And after the wound healed, if Lin Yuan still did not complete the girl's last wish, then he would face a powerful repulsive force. This was the rule of the descent of a god. He closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Memories flooded his mind like a tidal wave. Lin Yuan's beautiful facial features changed again, revealing a bitter smile. Lin Yuan touched his nose and murmured, "It turns out that I am just anyone." Yes, this girl was not even his believer. She just happened to know that he existed. Before Lin Yuan's descent, she had done all the rituals she knew and called out all the names of the gods she knew. Even Lin Yuan, the newly promoted god of the northern frontier, was not spared. It could be seen that the scope of the net was wide. Perhaps the humans in his previous life who called themselves the Sea King would be ashamed of their inferiority. The wound on her right hand came from the blood-stained dagger beside the dressing table. It was part of the ritual to summon a god, but this kind of ritual was usually fabricated by the lunatics of the devil sect. It was not worthy of trust at all. If she used this method to summon a god, she would have died from excessive blood loss before the gods who were busy every day could react. But at the end of her life, her prayer happened to be heard by Lin Yuan. At that time, she said, "Just anyone is fine. As long as my wish is fulfilled, I can give up everything." Then Lin Yuan was just anyone. It was obviously a ritual to summon the gods of the Tianwu world, but the only one who showed his divinity in the world, Lin Yuan, seemed to be unworthy of having a name. This is really infuriating. Lin Yuan shook his head, and his eyes flashed. His right hand sank, and the blood overflowing from the wound instantly solidified into black-red ice cubes, sealing the blood that was constantly overflowing. And after all, it was just a mortal body. According to the rate of bleeding, he estimated that in less than 10 days, he would die from excessive blood loss. But the system was actually so tyrannical? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a faint light. This body did not have any cultivation. It was completely an ordinary human, but it could use the skills on the system panel. Except for a few skills that could only be used through the body of a demonic beast, Lin Yuan could use most of the skills directly. What was this? This was cheating, my friend. Why did the gods not descend to the world? Was it because they were not willing to show their divinity and spread their beliefs? Obviously not. That was because no matter how powerful the gods were, once they descended into the body of an ordinary believer, they would not be able to use any of their divine power. Therefore, when ordinary people felt despair, they would also feel despair. The path of using brute force to break through 10,000 laws would definitely not work. When using wisdom, it did not matter how great the gods were praised by their believers. It was still the same sentence. The omnipotent and omniscient gods did not exist. They only had powerful strength, immortal looks, and long lifespans. When they were deprived of their powerful strength, the strength they could use might not be as strong as a human's. Why could the chess player control the fate of the chess piece? Because they were outside the chessboard. But if they fell into the chessboard and became a chess piece with the thoughts of the chess player, what could they do? Wasn't their fate in the hands of the chess player behind them? However, Lin Yuan was able to display his skills with the body of a mortal. This kind of behavior is tantamount to cheating. So what if he only had the strength of a mountain lord? How big could the trouble caused by an ordinary person be? Could the existence of a mountain lord not be able to deal with it? But the most important question now was, who were they? Chapter 770. Lin Yuan had already absorbed all of the girl's memories. However, the memories did not clearly point out who she wanted to kill. After all, who didn't have a few enemies when they were traveling in the world? However, the problem was that the girl's enemies were all over the world. The furthest were even from other dynasties. If he wanted to kill all of them, Lin Yuan would have to use the power of the northern frontier. However, that was obviously not realistic. Not to mention whether he could safely pass through the Sky Demon's territory, he might not even be safe in the south. After absorbing the girl's memories, Lin Yuan finally understood why the Sky Demon army had suddenly stationed troops at the Wei River to attack the northern frontier. It was not because the south had fallen. It was because there was no need for the Sky Demon to worry about the south. Ever since the Baixing Navy had been scattered by Lin Yuan, the Sky Demon had carried out a decapitation plan. The upper echelons of the southern interest groups led by Lei Qiuming had either died or escaped. Now, their whereabouts were unknown. Naturally, the south had fallen into the hands of the demon sect. What were the demon sect? They were madmen who worshipped Hongjun. Strictly speaking, the demon sect had contributed greatly to the Sky Demon's repeated invasions of the Tianwu world. Since their allies had begun to invade the south, it was naturally inappropriate for the heavenly demons to intervene. Therefore, they directly integrated their forces and began to eye the north covetously. Previously, Lin Yuan had set up a plan to fight against the Shenwu dynasty, but it had turned out to be a failure at this moment. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had led the wolf into the house. However, Lin Yuan was not an omniscient and omnipotent existence. Back then, he only had Lei Qiusheng in his eyes. In order to resist the Shenwu dynasty, he naturally had to resort to unscrupulous means. It did not matter if he had led the wolf into the house. In any case, the disaster would not come to him in a short period of time. However, who would have thought that Lei Qiusheng actually had a deal with the Sky Demon? Apart from Lei Qiusheng, most of the nobles, ministers, and dignitaries were also under the control of Sky Demon. This wave is lifting a rock and dropping it on my own feet. System? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a strange color, and he asked tentatively. Spit it out. The system did not seem to be in a good mood. It rebuked Lin Yuan fiercely, as if it was suddenly woken up from its sleep. Between the lines, there was a hint of resentment and displeasure. Give me a martial art. I want it to be powerful and domineering. It's best if it can attract attention. Lin Yuan said with a grin. The strength of a mountain lord could be unleashed, but that was not the normal state. When releasing skills, one could be said to be invincible. However, most of the skills required a strong physique to be used. Furthermore, skills like the Water Monarch and Formless Ice had a long cooldown that would allow the enemy to kill Lin Yuan. Therefore, the improvement of one's strength had to be on the right track. Furthermore, he was certain that this girl's enemy was definitely not far from her. Perhaps, the girl had already unknowingly discovered him, which led to her summoning the gods. If he could not solve the problem, then he would solve the person who raised the problem. No, if he could not find the hidden enemy, then he would make the hidden enemy jump out and find him. Request accepted. Calculating. Cross-world mission issuing. Mission completed. Host's request has been delivered to your doorstep. Please pay incense power to redeem it. Remember to leave a good review, dear. Lin Yuan? What the heck? What the heck is this cross-world mission issuing? What the heck is this that requires me to spend incense power? I spent more than 3,000 points of incense power. Why don't I just get a gray-scaled flood dragon person to be my bodyguard? The investment is small and the returns are high. It can even provide me with an endless supply of incense power. Are you a dog? Here's a friendly reminder. I couldn't sense your thoughts previously because that body of yours had been tampered with by the Beast Master. He might have used some kind of karma power or some kind of natural spiritual treasure. I won't be able to decipher it in a short period of time. However, if you use this body to communicate with me, regardless of whether you're willing or not, I can hear your thoughts. Are you King scolding me? Look straight at me, bastard. Do you really think you can use skills out of thin air? I'll say the same thing again. Even if you're dreaming, you should know your limits. Although the cost of using skills won't fall on this body of yours, it will be directly deducted from incense power. If you're unwilling, then don't use skills. Are you a member of the Peach Blossoms Network? Also, incense power has many uses. It's considered a hard currency in all the worlds. If you want living beings from other worlds to work for you, you'll have to pay incense power. When you make cross-world transactions with other hosts, you'll also have to pay incense power. Do you understand? If you don't use this thing, how are you going to become stronger? Why are you acting like a miser? As for the gray-scaled flood dragon person, don't forget that this isn't the northern frontier. Even if you've fallen into the hands of the demon sect, you'll have to use any tricks that you can't see the light of day. You can try and see how many righteous cultivators will appear to suppress you if a demon beast appears in a human city. I've deducted the incense power for you. That's all. Talk to you later. I still have things to do. A series of words appeared, catching Lin Yuan off guard. A moment later, a slightly yellowed ancient book appeared in front of Lin Yuan, as well as a silver-white long saber. Name, Guan Shanxue type. Weapon, saber. Rating, B characteristic, 1 drifting snow effect. This saber was refined from the cold iron of the snow mountain, supplemented with layers of cold materials, and forged with extremely cold fire. When swung, it can produce a large amount of ice-type spiritual energy, like drifting snowflakes. It's extremely beautiful, but also extremely dangerous. It can slowly lower the surrounding temperature, causing the blood of the people around it to gradually solidify and freeze. Characteristic, 2 cold front effect. The saber contains a large amount of ice-type spiritual energy. It can freeze everything that comes into contact with the saber. With every swing of the saber, the cold energy in the opponent's body will accumulate until it's completely frozen by the cold energy. Name, Thousand Mountain Saber Technique Type. Martial Arts Secret Manual Rating, 3rd grade martial arts effect. To cultivate this saber technique, one's aptitude is not important. The most important thing is perseverance. Only after swinging the saber 30,000 times a day can one be initiated. When one swings the saber light will fill the sky, as if 1,000 mountains are pressing down on it. It's not something that can be resisted by humans. Lin Yuan's strange eyes flashed. A curse hung on the edge of his mouth, but he didn't spit it out for a long time. Third-grade martial arts were much stronger than golden body technique, which was not initiated. But the problem was, how should one practice this saber technique? It was possible to rely on attribute points to accumulate proficiency, but golden body technique was a passive skill that could be actively activated. It was only a defensive skill, so it didn't matter whether one was proficient or not. It couldn't be based on the speed of activating the skill, right? So golden body technique only needed to progress in its cultivation. However, the saber technique had to be used against the enemy. If one couldn't use it proficiently, it would be a joke even if it was mastered in a second. Chapter 771. Lin Yuan glanced at the secret manual, and after roughly memorizing the cultivation route and the sword technique routine, he closed the secret manual and directly froze it into ice dregs and scattered them on the ground. He picked up Guan Shanxue and walked out of the room. All in all, the golden body technique was a superior martial art in Lin Yuan's eyes. It was similar to the indestructible Vajra body technique in a TV series. Even a beginner would have the strength of a so-called innate expert. However, for the system that set up the universe, it was indeed a mediocre martial art. As for the Thousand Mountain Saber technique, which was rated as a third-rate martial art by the system, it was a technique on the Tianwu continent that would be regarded as the ultimate treasure of a first-rate sect. The saber technique was very simple. Drawing the saber, striking, and withdrawing the saber. These three simple movements were like the basic saber techniques. However, the most terrifying part of the Thousand Mountain Saber technique was not the moment the saber was struck, but the moment the saber was drawn. One's qi and blood lingered on the saber. The stronger the qi and blood, the heavier the saber. If one had the physique of Lin Yuan's original body, this saber strike would have the power of 1,000 mountains. Of course, without the support of a strong physique, the Thousand Mountain Saber technique provided another way of thinking, the saber nurturing technique. Cultivators could continuously draw qi and blood from their bodies and infuse it into their saber. After a long time, the saber could even have the terrifying power to shatter the world. Although it was only one strike with blood, the power was boundless. Together with Guan Shanxue's strength, Lin Yuan could directly make a strike comparable to a Void Realm cultivators in 7 days. Phew! After circulating the saber nurturing technique, Lin Yuan's body shook twice, and his face turned pale. After 10 minutes, he steadied himself, and a faint sneer appeared on his delicate face. This strike, which had almost drained half of his qi and blood, could kill an extraordinary level 7. He was barely able to protect himself when he went out. Although this woman didn't know how much trouble she had caused, her mind wasn't completely empty. The inn she was staying in was called Red Dust. 1 day's expenses were comparable to 3 days' worth of cultivation resources for an airborne realm cultivator. If it wasn't for the fact that they could use common silver to settle the bill, this woman probably wouldn't even be able to afford to stay in the Red Dust Tavern. Generally speaking, normal people would not choose to live here. Even if the rooms were luxuriously decorated and the service was excellent, the cost of living here for a day was comparable to half a month's income of a small family. However, there was definitely a reason why it was expensive. The Red Dust Inn belonged to an extreme Dao organization called the Red Dust Association. It wasn't a large organization, but it was said that its leader, the Red Dust Taoist, was already a half-step Kongming cultivator. Although he couldn't compare to those first-rate sects, he definitely couldn't be underestimated. The Red Dust Tavern could be found in almost every city in the south. Regardless of whether it was the shopkeeper or the servant, they were all people who could get along well with both the good and the bad. They had decent cultivation and were able to control the situation. After all, although the Red Dust Tavern didn't have many customers, those who were willing to stay were all people who didn't lack money. Every day, they would throw real money into the Red Dust Tavern. Some people who didn't have enough money would even sell all kinds of treasures to pay for it. It was the main source of funds for the Red Dust Society. Thus, nothing could happen to the Red Dust Tavern. If something did happen, the other party would have to pay the price in blood. Otherwise, how would they survive in the underworld if their reputation was ruined? Apart from first-rate sex and imperial court officials, very few people dared to not give the Red Dust Association face. Thus, if one stayed in the Red Dust Tavern, they wouldn't have to worry about their enemies coming to seek revenge. Otherwise, they would be slapping the Red Dust Association's face and would definitely be hunted down by the entire Red Dust Association. This woman has stayed here for half a month without any enemies. This means that her enemies aren't as strong as the Red Dust Association. At the very least, they aren't strong enough to ignore the Red Dust Association. In other words, they can only be considered a second-rate power at most. This woman's family background isn't bad either. For several generations, her family status is comparable to that of a feudal official. TSK, how troublesome. She only knows that her family's fortunes have fallen, but she doesn't know what kind of calamity has befallen her family. After walking out of the tavern, Lin Yuan let out a long breath. A hint of helplessness flashed across his eyes. If he had a choice, he would still prefer to possess one of the believers in the northern frontier. However, the south was also good. He could stab the sky demon in the back a few times. If he did it well, he could even form a connection with the gray-scaled flood dragon person in the Endless Sea. It would be beneficial for the South and the Endless Sea's layout. Lin Yuan shook his head slightly. A cold light suddenly flashed across his multicolored eyes. From the moment he stepped out until now, he had already walked half a street. The Eye of God was also operating at full power. There were at least 7 people following behind him on this street. There were also people watching the tea houses and taverns on both sides of the street. It seemed like this woman's enemies had indeed come to her door. They didn't make a move immediately because they were afraid of the Red Dust Association. However, they sent out a lot of people to block her in the Red Dust Tavern. They were probably waiting for her to spend all her wealth and be chased out of the Red Dust Tavern before making a move. In fact, this woman really didn't have any money. At most, she would be chased out of the Red Dust Tavern in 3 days. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so desperate to use all kinds of rituals in an attempt to summon a god. All right, Lin Yuan muttered. He turned sideways and entered a dark alley. Immediately, the eyes of the 7 cultivators who had been following behind suddenly lit up. They put down their disguises and followed Lin Yuan into the alley. If they made a move in the Red Dust Tavern, they would be targeted by the Red Dust Association. If they made a move on the streets, they would also be targeted by the city guards. But wasn't this kind of dark and deserted alleyway the most suitable for dirty deeds like murder? In fact, when this kind of alley was first built, it was for this purpose. It existed in almost every city. There were many criminals. In Lin Yuan's previous world, it was still okay. However, in the Sky Martial continent, where the strong preyed on the weak, it was normal to want to reap without sowing just a bit of strength. There was no fear of killing these people even if they couldn't catch them all. They were like chives that could be harvested. Therefore, the local government could only turn a blind eye and build such dark alleys to provide a place for those dirty deeds in the city. This was to prevent things from getting out of hand. As long as the crime wasn't discovered, then there wouldn't be any crime. Little girl, you're asking for death. The first cultivator to enter the dark alley sneered. His hands moved, and his joints kept cracking. He was at the middle stage of the mortal evolution state. Wasn't it easy for him to deal with an ordinary woman? I ask, you answer. Otherwise die. Unexpectedly, the woman who was targeted by the higher-ups didn't have the slightest trace of panic on her face. Instead, she stood there calmly as if waiting for them to come to her door. Chapter 772. What the F***ck are you talking about? The cultivator raised his eyebrows and looked up and down at Lin Yuan. After confirming that he didn't have any cultivation, a sinister smile gradually appeared on his face, and he said in a cold voice, "Oh, I know, you don't have the money to let the Red Dust Society continue to protect you, so you plan to pretend to be a big wolf to scare us? Mortals will always be mortals. You'll never know. The cultivator's voice stopped abruptly, because at this moment he had already turned into an ice sculpture with two halves. Noisy. Lin Yuan frowned and didn't put away his sword. He looked at the second cultivator and said coldly, "I've never been a patient person. This is your chance. Think carefully before you speak." You. The second cultivator's breathing stopped slightly. His power was about the same as the first cultivator. The result would be the same if the sword landed on him. However, this woman clearly didn't have any chi of a cultivator. How could she unleash such a terrifying attack? As his thoughts flashed, the second cultivator suddenly felt like he understood. When his gaze landed on Guan Shanxue, his eyes were filled with greed. He said in a deep voice, "Talisman, it is definitely a talisman. I didn't expect you to have such fortune to find a magic treasure that can be used by ordinary people." Speaking of this, he also showed a hideous grin on his face. "Little girl, do you know that you're facing powerful and noble cultivators? The things we know are much more than what you know. Using a magic treasure of this level once is already an overdraft. You can't use it a second time in a short time." The 5 cultivators behind the second cultivator also reacted instantly. They suppressed the shock and panic in their eyes. Intense greed began to appear in their eyes. Even an ordinary person could instantly kill a middle-stage mortal evolution state. If a treasure of this level fell into their hands, even an airborne realm cultivator would have to avoid it for the time being. Lin Yuan's face was calm. He didn't say anything as though what the other party said had nothing to do with him. "Grandpa will give you a chance. Give me the saber in your hand and I will let you die a quick death. At least I won't let you be humiliated before dying." Pa. The second cultivator was laughing when he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. His vision suddenly dimmed. Lin Yuan, on the other hand, had already walked past him and faced the third cultivator. "Now, do you want to take a gamble and see if I can make the third slash?" "I did?" The second cultivator's face darkened. He wanted to turn around and attack Lin Yuan, but his body did not move. It was as if it was no longer his body. Following that, he felt as if the world was spinning. The last thing he saw was a headless corpse. The corpse stood where it was, and not a single drop of blood flowed out of the wound. If one looked closely, they would see that the blood that flowed out of the cut had all turned into dark red ice. The corpse stood there because it had been frozen into a lump. Gulp. The third cultivator swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The greed in his eyes instantly disappeared, leaving behind only endless panic and fear. In the next moment, the cultivator at the back of the group had just turned around when he fell to the ground with a plop. His body quickly shriveled up, and in an instant, he had become a dried corpse. Whoever runs will die. Lin Yuan's face was still expressionless. In reality, he knew very well that he didn't have the ability to kill the fourth person. He had already used the blade Nurturing Strike, Formless Ice, and Water Monarch. They were now entering the cooldown stage. As for skills like Sea Suppressing Tail and Void Embrace, he had to consider whether or not his body could withstand them. His main body was naturally fine, but this was an ordinary person's body. He would probably explode and die when he used these skills. As for the blood-boiling technique, to Lin Yuan's main body, a buff skill without any side effects was indeed quite good. However, this body was only that of an ordinary person. Could an ordinary person's body be compared to these cultivators in front of him if their physique was increased by 3 times? Wasn't that just wishful thinking? "I'm King Ning's right-hand man. I'm a disciple of the Flying Star sect. I'm Su Situ's right-hand man. I'm just a mercenary on a bounty mission." The 4 cultivators who were still alive thought quickly and responded to Lin Yuan's question. After all, the 7 of them had similar cultivation. The mission target could kill 3 of them in an instant. Who could guarantee that he didn't have the ability to kill a 4th person? They didn't even want to take a gamble. In other words, they were on this mission for the reward, but they hadn't reached the point where they would risk their lives to complete it. None of them wanted to continue angering Lin Yuan and see if they would become the next victim. King Ning? Flying Star Sect? Su Situ? Mercenary Guild? Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly. How many enemies did this woman make? This woman must have some secrets that even he didn't know about. Otherwise, the seniors of several feudal officials wouldn't have fallen for no reason. She also wouldn't have been chased to the point of trembling in fear. All her servants and attendants died in battle, and she had to spend a lot of money in exchange for the protection of the Red Dust Gang. Why are you guys trying to kill me? Lin Yuan tilted his head and asked the second question in a cold tone. I'm just following orders. As for the details, before King Ning's right-hand man could finish his sentence, his head had already flown out and hit the wall of the alley. Then you're worthless, Lin Yuan said expressionlessly, as if he was talking to the corpse. However, the other 3 people who were still alive knew that he was actually talking to them. No matter what they were thinking, it was best not to try to bluff their way out of this. Lying and being worthless would only lead to a dead end. They didn't believe that this woman, who seemed to be prepared, really didn't know anything. Su Situ's right-hand man and the mercenary quietly took a step back, not daring to face Lin Yuan. Such a small action naturally couldn't escape the eye of the god. Ah! Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly. His eyes fell on the Flying Star Sect disciple's face and asked, "It seems that you know very well why you're chasing me?" "No, we're not chasing you. We're chasing you." The Flying Star Sect disciple's face didn't change, but his legs kept trembling. He said in a trembling voice, "You have a body of extreme Yin. If you can be used as a double cultivation furnace, you can help our senior brother break through the realm." Chapter 773. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes. In the novels in his previous life, he had seen stories of sect disciples capturing cultivation vessels. But the problem was that even if he was in a novel, he would definitely be the main character, okay? How could such a story happen to him when he was targeted and wanted to be captured as a cultivation vessel? That was very strange. The disciple of the Flying Star Sect seemed to have regained his confidence when the name of his eldest brother was brought up. While he was still trembling, his tone became a lot harsher as he coldly said, "Miss Guan, our eldest brother is 41 years old, and he is already at the peak of the airborne realm. If you work with him, he will definitely make it to the celestial star realm within 2 years. Even Lord Ning and Su Sid have to give face to our eldest brother. There is no way the Guan clan, which has already declined, can escape from our eldest brother's grasp." At this point, the Flying Star Sect's disciple smiled and said disdainfully, "I don't know what kind of opportunity you have, but in the face of true power, it doesn't matter how many treasures you have. If you're willing to cooperate and give yourself and your opportunity to eldest senior brother, it'll only take a single word from eldest senior brother to make the Guan clan rise again." He was sure that he was the big senior brother of the Flying Star Sect. As for them, they should be the Flying Star Sect disciples, King Ning, and Su Situ's accomplices. Since he knew what he wanted to know, the rest was much easier. You're right. In the face of absolute power, treasures are useless no matter how many treasures you have. Unfortunately, you don't know anything about true power. Lin Yuan slowly looked up, and a cold light flashed in his multicolored eyes. The next moment, his chi changed. Name, Guan Zhaoshan. Status, God descends. Lin Yuan. State, 7/10 speed, 11 attack, 13 defense, 11 assignable attribute points, 0 talent. First, the 9-Yin Phoenix body is a special constitution. Cultivation efficiency is increased by 100%, and the affinity for Yin attribute cultivation methods is maxed out. If one cultivates Yin attribute or Frost attribute cultivation methods, their cultivation speed will be increased by another 100%. However, when cultivating Yin attribute or Frost attribute cultivation methods, their cultivation speed will be reduced by 70%. Martial Arts 1. Thousand Mountain Sword Technique. Skills 1. Sword Nurturing Technique. Congratulations, host, for killing a level 5 Mortal Evolution State Cultivator. Gain 10 attribute points. Congratulations, host, for killing a level 6 Mortal Evolution State Cultivator. Gain 12 attribute points. Congratulations, host, for killing a level 5 Mortal Evolution State Cultivator. Gain 10 attribute points. After confirming the target he wanted to kill, Lin Yuan gained the initial approval of this body and became more and more compatible with it. He even opened the attribute panel. Although it was an independent system panel, with the system, it was equivalent to soaring. Me cheating, super awesome. Looking at the prompts that were refreshed one after another by the system, Lin Yuan almost turned into a lemon spirit. Back then, he had risked his life to kill demonic beasts. How many attribute points did he get? As for the human model, a level 5 mortal evolution state could provide 10 attribute points? I'm jealous. Is this what a genius looks like? Mortal evolution state, level 7? The confidence that the Flying Star Sect's disciple had vanished in an instant as he stuttered. In an instant, she went from an ordinary person to a level 7 mortal evolution state. What terrifying aptitude was this? Even if he was placed in those super first-rate sects, he could be groomed as a young sect leader. Suddenly, he wasn't so confident in the Flying Star Sect anymore. After all, the Flying Star Sect was only a second-rate sect. Even a second-rate Lu Lin organization like the Red Dust Society didn't dare to mess with them, much less those stronger forces. If Guan Zhaoshan escaped Zhulu City and gained the favor of a certain top sect, the entire Flying Star Sect would be in trouble soon. No, he had to run. He had to report this to the sect and get rid of Guan Zhaoshan as soon as possible. Otherwise, everyone would die, and the entire Flying Star Sect would die because of his big brother's greed. How dare you still want to run? I want you to help me cultivate. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. The Guan Shanxue in his hand whizzed out and pierced through the heart of the Feixing sect disciple. Congratulations, host, for killing a level 5 mortal evolution state cultivator. Gained 3 attribute points. Lin Yuan? What the F***CK? Lin Yuan was even more jealous. Even when his main body killed a spirit beast that was 1 level higher than him, he would only gain 3 to 5 attribute points. It was only when his cultivation level increased and he encountered stronger enemies that he gained more attribute points. But look at this human body. Was this something that a human could do? Killing a cultivator 2 levels lower than him and still gaining 3 attribute points. What would happen if he killed an enemy that was 1 level higher than him? If he had such aptitude, how could he still be stuck at level 8 Mountain Lord state? He would have taken off long ago. The Su Sidu family's consecrator took 2 steps back and said in a trembling voice, "Young Lady Guan, there's no enmity between us. It's just that the Flying Star Sect is too powerful. Even my master has to be wary of them. If we don't do anything, the Guan family's mistake will be a lesson to us. Please, give me a chance. I promise I won't be your enemy again." He could tell that Guan Zhaoshan wasn't planning to let them go at all. However, the so-called King Ning was just a son of Lei Qiuming. The official position of Su Situ was also given by Lei Qiuming himself. This guy had established himself as an emperor in the south. In essence, he was still the former King Qingpeng. The officials and generals under him naturally wouldn't have the ability to go against a sect, even if it was just a second-rate sect. On the other hand, Guan Zhaoshan came from the Guan family, which was an old aristocratic family of the Shenwu dynasty. Hence, she had always listened to Lei Qiuming. If Lei Qiuming didn't stab her in the back, a mere Flying Star Sect wouldn't be able to threaten the Guan family. That's good too. The better the aptitude of this body, the faster I can improve. 27 days is enough. Lin Yuan murmured to himself as he killed all the mercenaries and servants of the Su Situ family. After obtaining 7 attribute points, he began to distribute them. His chi also rose to level 8 of the mortal evolution state. He was only 1 step away from level 9. He took out Guan Shanxue from the body of the Flying Star Sect's disciple. After making sure that there wasn't any blood on the blade, he hung Guan Shanxue on his back and walked out of this dark alley. That was something only criminals would do. Now that Lin Yuan had opened the system interface, he was still worried that he didn't kill enough people to overthrow the demon sect and stab the sky demon in the back. If the local government and the city guards wanted to find trouble with him, they could come. Killing 1 was a crime, killing 10,000 was a hero. After experiencing the era of the spirit beast, Lin Yuan couldn't resonate with the life and death of humans anymore. After all, they were two completely different life forms. The difference between a mortal and a god was the difference between a mortal and an ant. When a mortal walked, would they care about how many ants they stepped on? Chapter 774. Moments later, Lin Yuan returned to the Red Dust Inn. He didn't know where the Flying Star sect was. He also didn't know where Lei Qiuming and the officials he appointed were. However, today's act of luring the snake out of its hole was pretty good. Although he hid his qi, 7 mortal evolution state cultivators with ill intentions followed him in, but he was the one who came out in the end. Those people in charge of watching him would definitely go in and investigate. Then, they would come to the same conclusion as the first cultivator. Lin Yuan had a great treasure on him. Although the profession of a refiner existed in the Tianwu continent, and when Lin Yuan first entered this world, he came into contact with many cultivators who had weapons with special powers. However, that was obviously just an example. In other words, only cultivators who often wandered on the line between life and death would not hesitate to buy or make special weapons at a high price. Although the southern part of the Shangwu dynasty was also close to the endless sea where spirit beasts ran rampant, it was basically safe as long as one didn't go out to sea. This was because not all sea demons had the ability to go on land. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to unleash their full power. If such sea demons were caught, they would probably be cooked into delicious dishes that night. However, the Hengduan mountain range was different. Spirit items were abundant, but spirit beasts ran rampant. In the mountains and forests, spirit beasts had a lot more advantages than human cultivators. In the southern part of the sea, it wasn't difficult to deal with the sea demons that came ashore even without magic artifacts. However, at the northern frontier's Hengduan mountain range, who would dare to enter the Hengduan mountain range without a life-saving trump card? Forgery masters were very common in the north. There were quite a number of forgery masters in the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works, but in the south, forgery masters might not be able to do well. Without a few specialties, the southern forgery masters might not be able to do as well as ordinary blacksmiths. Although magic artifacts weren't popular in the south, no one could deny their value. If one had the chance to get it, it would probably cause a bloodbath in the southern cultivation realm. Ordinary magic artifacts were like this, let alone this one that Lin Yuan made them think existed. If an ordinary person could use it and crush 7 middle-stage mortal evolution state cultivators, wouldn't someone with a higher cultivation level be able to easily fight someone with a higher cultivation level? Of course, the strength of those stalkers was about the same as the 7 cultivators who had died in the alley. As long as they were not blinded by greed, they would not choose to kill Lin Yuan for the sake of seizing the treasure. After all, they had learned from their mistakes. The reason why Lin Yuan had returned to the Red Dust Inn was to make them completely give up on this idea. Although the treasures were good, one needed to be alive to enjoy them, right? After offending the Red Dust Tavern and hiding the matter of the treasure from the higher-ups, who could protect them? Therefore, their only choice was to report Lin Yuan's treasures to their superiors. By then, there would be no need to worry about no powerful figures appearing in Zhulu City. Even the first senior brother of the Flying Star sect might come personally. After all, there was no way he would give up a treasure and a furnace that could help him break through to the next realm. If they killed him, the mission would be considered half completed. Moreover, the information obtained from these higher-ups would always be more than the information obtained from the mouths of the people at the bottom. To put it bluntly, these people probably only knew who the target of the mission was. As for the specifics, the dead disciples of the Flying Star sect would probably be the limit of what they could get. They didn't have the right to know the deeper details. The moment he stepped into the Red Dust Inn, Lin Yuan immediately stepped forward. He frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, "Shopkeeper, why did you suddenly stop me?" The plump shopkeeper behind the counter, who always had a smile on his face like a Maitreya Buddha, chuckled as he stood up from his chair. He said, "Miss Guan, although the Red Dust Inn doesn't ask about the private matters of its customers, the trouble you're in is too great. I'm afraid the Red Dust Inn won't be able to protect you." "What do you mean?" Lin Yuan was slightly startled and said with a chuckle. This shopkeeper's eyes were so sharp. When Guan Zhaoshan stayed at the Red Dust Inn, she was disguised as a man. Her identity documents were all forged by the Guan family before they were destroyed. Even if they were taken to the government, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Yet this shopkeeper called her a miss. Just based on his eyesight, he probably wasn't someone easy to deal with. In addition, the shopkeeper's action to stop him was a test between cultivators. If he took another step forward, his right leg might have been directly crushed by the true energy the shopkeeper had set up beforehand. Lin Yuan's main body wouldn't be afraid, but this body was only at level 8 of the mortal evolution state. Even if he was a prodigy, he wouldn't be able to fight against someone at the peak stage of the airborne state. In a direct confrontation, Lin Yuan could instantly kill him. However, Lin Yuan could not foolishly take this kind of trick head-on like how he controlled the demonic beast. Based on the strength of both sides, he did not even have the qualifications to exchange injuries, because the shopkeeper could also instantly kill his physical body. Miss Guan, you're asking the obvious, aren't you? The shopkeeper's eyes turned cold, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He said coldly, "When you went out, you were still an ordinary person who hadn't even touched the threshold of cultivation. Now you're at the late stage of the mortal evolution state. Even if you hide your chi, you can't escape my eyes. I haven't asked who you are yet." As soon as he finished speaking, the servants in the inn drew their weapons one after another. The Red Dust Inn had always been like this. When there were guests, they were the servants who welcomed and sent them off. However, if someone came to cause trouble, they would turn into bandits who killed without blinking an eye. Lin Yuan's face sunk. The Red Dust Gang seemed to be stronger than he thought. His chi concealment technique was a means of a mountain lord-level monster. A mere airborne realm cultivator, even at the peak of the airborne realm, shouldn't be able to see through it. Either the shopkeeper had cultivated some secret technique, or he had a secret treasure that could observe other people's cultivation. Regardless of which it was, the Red Dust Gang's strength was probably much more powerful than it appeared on the surface. Even those first-rate sects and clans in the northern frontier might not have such a foundation. How could a mere quasi-first-rate force have such a secret technique or treasure? I've looked into it. Guan Zhaoshan has been frequently buying materials for sacrificial rituals. If I'm not mistaken, you're probably a wasteland Een god she summoned, who honored her last wish and took her body. This sort of thing is a taboo in the Red Dust Tavern, but I never thought that she would actually succeed. It's my dereliction of duty for not chasing her away in advance. That's why when you left this morning, although your eyes changed, I resisted the urge to speak. The shopkeeper waved his right hand, and a guandao whizzed out from the counter and landed in his hand. Chapter 775. However, since you've already left, why bother coming back? The shopkeeper swung the guandao in his hand and stroked his beard. He then said in a deep voice, "Our little inn is too small to accommodate a god like you. Please pack your things and leave this place. The Red Dust Society doesn't want to get involved in this trouble." Lin Yuan chuckled. It was not common for eyes to change color, but ordinary people would not think that a god had descended. After all, gods had not appeared in the eyes of the world for a long time. They would either guard the heaven's gate or hide in remote places like the endless sea. As for those Een gods, they did not have the means to descend and possess people. The Red Dust Society actually knew about the possession of gods. Immediately, Lin Yuan's assessment of the danger in his heart increased by a few levels. Some karma has already been involved. Don't you think it's a bit too ridiculous to want to get off halfway? With a light hook of his right hand, a chair slid behind him. Immediately, he sat down and said in a deep voice, "When I accepted Guan Zhaoshan's money, you guys didn't say that you couldn't handle this trouble. Now that things have gotten out of hand, you want to leave? Have you asked for my opinion?" With the emphasis of, the servants in the inn all knelt on the ground, their bodies trembling. Even the shopkeeper with the guandao almost broke his cultivation. The dragon might of a mountain lord was not something a mere mortal evolution state or airborne state cultivator could handle. Asking, "Who are you?" The shopkeeper's face kept trembling. He resisted the urge to kneel and asked, Well said, I'm just a god of the northern frontier, the Black Water Dragon King Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan raised his hand and snapped his fingers, retracting the dragon might. The vertical line that appeared vaguely in his multicolored eyes disappeared. In an instant, the shopkeeper was like a mute who had eaten coptis. His expression was bitter, but he could not open his mouth. In the entire Shenwu dynasty, where was there a safer place than the northern frontier? The southern interest groups could not fight the Sky Demon. Even the previous confrontation was barely possible because of the Baixing Navy's troops at Wei River. Some time ago, the Baixing Navy was suddenly transferred, and the southern interest groups instantly collapsed. Not to mention fighting the Sky Demon, even those demon sect members who were hibernating here easily defeated Lei Qiuming and the others. However, the Northern Territory was an existence that could directly confront the Sky Demon army with their chariots, horses, and cannons. Since the Red Dust Society knew about the arrival of the gods, it was impossible for them not to know about the existence of the Guardians of the Elysium. The heavenly demons were jumping around quite happily, but anyone with a little bit of knowledge knew that the heavenly demons were destined to not be able to cause much trouble. They were like grasshoppers jumping around after autumn, one day less and less. However, the northern frontier was different. As long as the northern frontier could survive the battle with the Sky Demon, it could directly replace the Shenwu dynasty in the future and become the 7th dynasty in the world. Who would be willing to offend the northern frontier? If the descending god was someone else, the Red Dust Society would not be afraid of revenge whether they killed or banished the god. However, the one who came was Lin Yuan, this evil star. He immediately felt that it was impossible to get off the tiger. Thinking about the dragon might just now, the shopkeeper did not suspect Lin Yuan's identity. After all, the Red Dust Society was a forest organization that made a living in the south. It was not the first time they had encountered the monsters of the Endless Sea. The dragon might was not unfamiliar to the Red Dust Society. If the one who emitted the dragon might just now was not Lin Yuan, then the situation would be even worse. Including the 4 ancestral dragons, the dragon race of the 4 seas only had 6 dragon gods. Any one of them could directly destroy the Red Dust Society with a stomp of their foot. The consequences were much more serious than offending Lin Yuan of the northern frontier. I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I did not know that the Black Water Dragon King was here. Please forgive me for my previous offense. After all, the shopkeeper was an all-powerful figure in the forest. It was standard for him to know when to yield and when to stand tall. After weighing the difference between the Red Dust Society and the northern frontier, he decisively lowered his head and did not mention anything about banishing Lin Yuan. Then, the shopkeeper changed the topic and said again, I have only read about the gods descending in the ancient books of the Red Dust Society. I heard that those who offer their bodies to the gods will have the gods help them fulfill their last wishes. Otherwise, the gods will directly expel the gods' consciousness from their bodies. I wonder if the Red Dust Society can help with Miss Guan's last wishes? Lin Yuan was currently the most popular golden thigh. Even the Red Dust Society had no reason not to curry favor with him. Even if they could not obtain Lin Yuan's gift, they could still befriend Lin Yuan. In the future, when the northern frontier established a dynasty, the Red Dust Society would not be included in the hit list. The Red Dust Society knows a lot of secrets. That's good. Guan Zhaoshan chose the Red Dust Society to protect her when she was in trouble. This matter has karma with the Red Dust Society, so it's best if you are willing to help. Lin Yuan's eyes turned cold. He said slowly, the destruction of the Guan family should not be hidden from the eyes and ears of the Red Dust Society. I want you to kill everyone involved in this matter. Can you do it? The shopkeeper smiled bitterly and shook his head. He said bitterly, the Dragon King thinks too highly of the Red Dust Society. Yes, the Red Dust Society does know a lot of secrets, but that's because we have a long history, not because we are powerful. If you want us to deal with Lei Qiuming's lackeys, there's no problem. However, the mastermind behind the destruction of the Guan family is the Flying Star sect, a quasi-first-rate sect in the south. They have a Kongming realm ancestor and 3 half-step Kongming realm elders. It's said that the sect master is about to enter the Kongming realm. With such strength, even if the Supreme Dragon King comes out of seclusion, the Red Dust Society will not be able to deal with them. Lin Yuan was stunned again. The first time he was stunned was because the shopkeeper saw through his aura concealment. This time, he was stunned because of the Flying Star Sect's strength. 1 Kongming Realm expert and 4 half-step Kongming Realm experts. This kind of strength was enough to be listed as a super first-rate sect in the northern frontier. However, in the south, it was only a quasi-first-rate sect. It seemed that the south, where the Guardians of the Elysium were active, was much more complicated than he thought. That's not a problem. I will take care of the Flying Star sect. However, the rest of the trash can't be let go. This king can't be bothered to search house by house. Lin Yuan waved his hand lightly. Then, he said word by word, "Do you understand this king's intentions? I will definitely do it. I will send a message to the Supreme Dragon King and have him do it himself." Under Lin Yuan's oppressive gaze, the shopkeeper trembled and nodded repeatedly. This king has always been fair in his rewards and punishments. The Red Dust Society will help you, and this king will not let you work for nothing. If there are any enemies of the Red Dust Society in Zhulu City, you can take revenge. This king will take care of them for you. Lin Yuan slowly narrowed his eyes. When he finished speaking, a look of joy flashed across the shopkeeper's face. Chapter 776. 3 days later. Zhulu City, Iron Hand Gang's headquarters. Congratulations, host. You have killed a level 7 mortal evolution state cultivator. Gained 5 attribute points. Congratulations, host. You have killed a level 5 mortal evolution state cultivator. Gained 3 attribute points. Congratulations, host. You have killed a level 1 airborne state cultivator. Gained 20 attribute points. One system notification after another flashed before his eyes, but Lin Yuan didn't feel anything. He just opened the system panel and distributed the attributes one by one. Although he was jealous, Lin Yuan was already used to the terrifying potential of this body. Moreover, this body would completely belong to him after the mission was completed. What was the point of being jealous? Congratulations, host. You have completed the breakthrough mission. Sweep the Lulin Zhulu City. Mission reward, 50 attribute points and a third-rate mental cultivation method. Congratulations, host. You have successfully broken through to the level 1 of the airborne state. Please keep up the good work. The prompt of the completion of the breakthrough task was also refreshed. Lin Yuan exhaled a long breath of foul air and stood on the mountain of corpses and sea of blood with a carefree smile. He had his reasons for wanting to help the Red Dust Society get rid of their obstacles. The Flying Star sect didn't need to be completely wiped out. Clearly, it wasn't necessary to deal with the terrifying beings of the Empyrean and even half-step Empyrean states. After all, the mastermind behind the destruction of the Guan family was only the big brother of the Flying Star sect. As for them, they were referring to the southern interest groups led by Lei Qiuming. As mentioned before, with the strength of an old aristocratic family like the Guan family, even if they couldn't be compared to the Flying Star sect, once their foundation was revealed, even the Flying Star sect would have to think twice before acting. If it wasn't for Lei Qiuming's fear of the Guan family's strength, even if the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother had evil thoughts, he wouldn't have dared to make a move on the Guan family's beloved daughter. Therefore, Guan Zhaoxin's hatred for the Flying Star sect couldn't be compared to the southern interest groups at all. This was the biggest difference between them. Otherwise, they could be summed up with one word. Then again, the strength of the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother should not be underestimated. After all, the Flying Star sect could be considered a super force in the northern frontier. In the cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak, those who could firmly suppress the other disciples of the Flying Star sect and become the eldest senior brother naturally did not rely on their qualifications. After all, on the path of cultivation, the one who reached the top was the teacher was not just a saying. If you met someone younger than you but with a higher cultivation base, you had to obediently address them as senior brother. Otherwise, you would not even know how you died. The man was at least at the pinnacle of the airborne realm, but it was apparent that he was capable of more than that. Furthermore, if the senior brother of the Flying Star sect were to personally come to Zhulu City to capture Guanzhouxian, there would have been seniors of considerable powers accompanying him. In the worst-case scenario, the skills that Lin Yuan could use would definitely be used to greet that senior. Against that senior, there was a high chance that he could only rely on his own cultivation. If it had been an ordinary cultivator, they would probably have had no choice but to sit and wait for death or pray that things wouldn't be that bad. But Lin Yuan was different. He was a man with cheats. He used the Red Dust Society's name to clean up the Lulan forces that were entrenched in Zhulu City. On the surface, the Red Dust Society would naturally help him clean up the mess. While earning the Red Dust Society's favor, he could also openly kill people in Zhulu City to earn attribute points. Furthermore, he had to be more ruthless when dealing with the Flying Star sect. After all, even if he could easily take the life of the chief disciple of the Flying Star sect, it would not make the Flying Star sect fear him. Instead, it would make the Flying Star sect hate him. When the time came, there would be endless trouble that would be enough to make Lin Yuan suffer. He wanted to get rid of the evil cult and stab the Sky Demon Core in the back. If he was held back by the Flying Star sect, things would be bad. As such, it was best to kill a powerful elder of the Flying Star sect to show his fangs. That way, the Flying Star sect would have to consider the necessity of making a mortal enemy of an extraordinary cultivator if they wanted to take revenge. From today onward, the Iron Palm clan will be removed from Zhulu City. A member of the Red Dust Society announced the destruction of the Iron Palm clan with a smile. At the same time, the second dragon head of the Red Dust Society, who had already arrived in Zhulu City, was slightly stunned. He looked at the figure standing on the mountain of corpses and opened his mouth, but no words came out. It's just a few Lulan gangs. Their hands are stained with the blood of innocent people. Second Dragon Head used to be a constable of the Shenwu dynasty. You don't have to grieve for these people and have evil intentions towards me, do you? The Red Dust Society's power is not something that these simple local bullies can compare to. Moreover, we're on the same boat now, aren't we? Unknowingly, Lin Yuan had already passed by him. He stretched out his hand and patted his shoulder, leaving a slender bloody handprint. Then he strode away. Simple? Second Dragon Head felt that he could hardly breathe. The Iron Palm clan could barely be considered a third-rate Lulan gang. They were nothing to the Red Dust Society, but to a branch in Zhulu City, they were an opponent that they had nothing to fear. Almost all the members of the Iron Palm clan were at the middle stage of the mortal evolution state, and the leader of the Iron Palm clan was at the early stage of the airborne realm. Such a force was not considered strong in Zhulu City. At the very least, the shopkeeper of Zhulu City could deal with them. However, there was an alliance between the various gangs. Once the shopkeeper of Zhulu City made a move, he would have to face at least 5 airborne realm cultivators. However, Lin Yuan's move would not attract the attention of the other gangs. In other words, they would not treat him as if he was facing a great enemy. Therefore, under Lin Yuan's thunderous means, the various gangs were taken down one by one. In total, nearly 10,000 people died in Lin Yuan's hands. This directly made some of the lesser forces who were secretly clamoring to rise to the top not even dare to think about dividing up the territory. At present, the Red Dust Society could be said to be the strongest among the Lulan gang in Zhulu City. In Lin Yuan's words, such actions could only be described as simple. Then again, after seeing Lin Yuan's means, it was indeed very difficult for him to have any ill intentions toward Lin Yuan. Even without the identity of the Black Water Dragon King, such a murderous god was not someone the Red Dust Society wanted to mess with. Lin Yuan did not have such thoughts. He just felt a little helpless. Over 10,000 cultivators were killed by him, and a large number of attribute points were wasted. After all, before the breakthrough mission was completed, the attribute points accumulated to the upper limit would not continue to increase. Otherwise, his current strength would not be as simple as being at the airborne realm level 1. What was more troublesome was that he had already killed all the people in Zhulu City. If he were to kill the other Lulan gang, the Red Dust Society might not be able to handle it. If he were to do something wrong, terrifying Lulan gang cultivators might come. If he did not make a move against the Lulin gang, the other forces would either have clans or sects behind them. They were not people to be trampled on. The progress of his strength seemed to have stagnated. Chapter 777. Zhulu City was not considered a small city. After all, a power like the Red Dust Assembly would disdain to set up a branch in a third-rate or even unrated human gathering place. In the entire south, Zhulu City was considered a second-rate city. A step further and it would be a first-rate city. In the south, which had always been attacked by the sea demons, there was only one first-rate city, and it was close to the central plains. A city like this would definitely have a huge flow of people, so the speed at which news spread could be said to be terrifying. Within 3 days, Lin Yuan had used the name of the Red Dust Assembly to wipe out almost all the Lulin forces in Zhulu City. Very quickly, the news spread to other cities, instantly attracting the attention of countless people. This kind of thing that could change the situation of an entire region with one's own strength. The most recent was probably the northern frontier's Black Jiao's destruction of Mountain Blocking City, thus establishing the path to dominating the north. That was enough to be recorded in the history books, the Berserk Python Calamity. And this time, this woman called Guan Zhaoshan had slaughtered her way through the Lulin forces in Zhulu City. Other than the Red Dust Assembly, almost all the famous forces in the underworld had been wiped out, leaving only the small fries in Zhulu City. Although it could not be compared to the Berserk Python Calamity in the north, the title of Killing Demon was indeed placed in front of Guan Zhaoshan's name. Although the Lulin cultivators were also cultivators, compared to ordinary cultivators from aristocratic families or sects, they had a heavier habit of the underworld. For example, in Lin Yuan's previous life in Japan, if one did not have a certain status in the underworld, even tattoos were not allowed. In the Tianwu continent, this practice was even heavier. The Lulin cultivators rarely had nicknames. Once they had a nickname, they would show their signboard in the underworld, and the leaders of ordinary forces would have to treat them with respect. As for those Lulin cultivators who did not have the strength to give themselves nicknames, they usually did not have a good ending. For example, in the ancient underworld of Lin Yuan's previous life, people who gave themselves nicknames such as Invincible Divine Fists were basically people who claimed their nicknames today and might die tomorrow in the Tianwu continent. This time, although the nickname Grim Demon was forcibly given to Lin Yuan by busybodies, there was no lack of Lulin forces behind the scenes pushing the matter. The Greenwood faction that could establish their territory in a place like Zhulu City was basically an outsider. They were just a branch of the Red Dust faction or a branch of a certain faction. Naturally, the headquarters behind these people wouldn't just watch the Red Dust faction monopolize Zhulu City. But there was nothing they could do. They couldn't find fault with the Red Dust Society. This was because the Red Dust Union could have done things according to the rules when it came to clearing out the forest in Deer Chasing City. In advance, they would openly hand over letters of challenge to the various Lulin factions, stating that if the newcomer wanted to be promoted, they would have to stain their hands with blood as proof of their allegiance. This was basically a rule that had been passed down for a long time in the Lulin factions. If you're not convinced, you can find a newcomer from your own clan who hasn't taken the position yet to come out and kick the Red Dust Society's ass. But this obviously wasn't realistic. Because the Guan clan had already been destroyed, it wasn't hard to find information on Guan Zhaoshan. With a bit of effort, they could find Guan Zhaoshan's previous records. Therefore, Guan Zhaoshan was indeed a newcomer with a clean background. But for a newcomer to challenge the various factions and win, the success rate was pitifully low. With this kind of strength, talent, and a clean background, why would he want to join a Lulin faction? Wouldn't it be better to find a sect to join? Now that the Shenwu dynasty had collapsed and Lei Qiuming's whereabouts were unknown, although the demon sect's disciples had secretly infiltrated, it wasn't that easy to swallow up the alliance formed by the various clans and sects in the south. Currently, the clans and sects were the ones in charge in the south. After joining these factions, they could do whatever they wanted. Even if they did some dirty business, as long as they didn't go too far and made it known to everyone, not only would the local government not pursue the matter, they would even help cover it up. Finding a genius comparable to Guan Zhaoshan to kick the Red Dust Society's ass could no longer be described as difficult. It could even be described as impossible. However, although the Red Dust Society's actions were in accordance with the rules of the Lulan faction, it wasn't flawless. After all, Guan Zhaoshan was still a newcomer. Even if she succeeded, she would only have the right to speak in the Red Dust Society. In the big circle of the Lulan faction, Guan Zhaoshan was still a nobody. As long as they put in some effort and gave her a nickname, then according to the rules of the Jianghu, any Lulan faction cultivator who wasn't satisfied with Guan Zhaoshan's nickname of Grim Demon could come and challenge her. As long as the gap between the two sides wasn't a big realm, then it was in accordance with the rules. While the undercurrent of the Lulan faction was surging in the south. Zhulu City, Red Dust Inn. Second Dragon Head smiled bitterly with an apologetic face. He lowered his voice and said, "Dragon King, I'm really sorry. We didn't think this through before." The Supreme Dragon Head didn't expect that the Lulan faction would be so shameless as to use such underhanded means to kill you, a genius belonging to the Red Dust Society. At this point, he paused and said with a sincere face, "What the Supreme Dragon Head means is that if you avoid the battle, although you'll lose some face, there won't be any other way to deal with you. We still have a big plan and don't have the time to play with those Lulan faction who are only thinking about revenge." Lin Yuan looked at Second Dragon Head meaningfully. His right hand kept tapping lightly on the back of the chair. He didn't believe a single word of this nonsense. They were all foxes from the same mountain. Why did they have to talk about strange stories? Those Lulan faction could think of a way to deal with him so quickly. How could Red Dust Taoist, who was known to be able to suppress the Lulan faction in the south and intimidate the other Lulan faction in seclusion all year round, not think of this? However, after Second Dragon had said this, he really did have Lin Yuan's best interests at heart. After all, if Lin Yuan avoided the battle, it would be equivalent to admitting defeat to the entire Lulan faction in the south. He would lose face and his nickname. However, it was different for the Red Dust Society. If Lin Yuan admitted defeat or lost the battle, the Red Dust Society would have to obediently spit out all the territories and profits they had taken. They would also have to compensate each faction with a large sum of resources as a sign of defeat. For the Red Dust Society, who knew the inner workings of Grim Demon Guan Zhao, this suggestion was a huge loss. Lin Yuan lowered his head. What he lost was Guan Zhaoshan's face. After all, it was just a shell. If it weren't for his outstanding talent, Lin Yuan wouldn't have cared. However, the Red Dust Society definitely didn't know how special Guan Zhaoshan's shell was to Lin Yuan, so they wouldn't consider it. Speaking of which, Lin Yuan lowered his head and lost Guan Zhaoshan's face. At the same time, not only would the Red Dust Society have to spit out the territories they had recently taken, they would also have to pay a large sum of money. Chapter 778. This amount of gold and silver was definitely not a small amount. After all, Lin Yuan had killed nearly 10,000 members of the Forest Alliance, including 5 who were in the airborne realm. It would have cost a lot to train such combat forces. Even if the Red Dust Society did not foot the entire bill, they would have to pay at least 1/10 of the resources to those Forest Alliance forces. Even with the Red Dust Society's size, paying out such a huge amount of resources was enough to hurt them. That was why Lin Yuan's eyes became meaningful when he thought about the whole thing. "Are you guys betting that I'll definitely accept the challenge?" Lin Yuan had a playful smile on his face as he asked softly. In truth, it was not difficult to guess what the Red Dust Society was thinking after thinking about it calmly. After all, Lin Yuan had always been domineering toward other forces ever since he came into being. The only time he bowed his head was when he was dealing with the Guardian of Heaven's Gate. However, that level of information was already a secret among secrets. If the Red Dust Society knew about it, it could only mean that there was at least a Guardian of Heaven's Gate behind the Red Dust Society. Would Lin Yuan, who had always been domineering, bow his head to a group of airborne realm cultivators of the Forest Alliance? The answer was hard to say, but there was a high chance that he would not. Even if Lin Yuan had guessed the Red Dust Society's plot, it would still be the same. After all, he was a king. A king was not someone who would bow his head. Even if he did, it would be for the benefit of the entire force. The current situation was not one where a king had to bow his head. As for what would happen if Lin Yuan really did bow his head, the Red Dust Society was working for Lin Yuan. Now that they had paid a huge price, Lin Yuan would have no choice but to face the Red Dust Society with guilt when they met in the future. Even if the 7th dynasty was established, the Red Dust Society would be able to stay at the top of the Southern Forest Alliance for at least 10 years, let alone 100 years. As for the North, the Red Dust Society did not dare to have such extravagant hopes. That was the territory of the Monster Emperor Association, and there was no need to talk about who was behind the Association of Monster Emperors. Snatching food from Lin Yuan, wasn't that just courting death? What happened to the remaining members of the Jiao family was enough to sound the alarm for these cultivators who were active in the dark side of the world. If they stood against Lin Yuan, once they lost, they would have no way out. If they were valuable, they would have a chance to be a dog. If they weren't, they could refer to those aristocratic families that had been destroyed in the north. After being exposed by Lin Yuan, the second dragon head's expression only changed slightly. He quickly nodded and said indifferently, "We are indeed betting that the Dragon King will not avoid the challenge. After all, from your previous behavior of not leaving anyone alive once you attacked, I reckon that you are actually very interested in killing people. I think that you have no reason to refuse these heads that are delivered to your door. Is this your idea, or Taoist red dust's?" Lin Yuan tilted his head and looked at the heavy traffic on the street below. He sized up the second dragon head from the corner of his eyes, still with a meaningful smile on his lips. The question he asked was like a soul interrogation. The second dragon head's expression changed several times. It only took him a few seconds to go from a slight frown to a face full of indifference. It was like a famous face change in a Sichuan opera. The Supreme Dragon Head has set off personally to track down the whereabouts of Lei Qiuming and the others. He is busy with official business and has no time to deal with the affairs of Zhulu City, so, the second Dragon Head replied with an indifferent expression. Since they had already shed all pretenses, there was no need to keep up the pretense. "You're really not a good dog." Lin Yuan laughed, and the smile on his face no longer had that meaningful look. In the afternoon of the same day, the news that the grim demon, Guan Zhaoshan, had accepted the challenge and directly issued a challenge to all the cultivators of the southern forest. This news spread like wildfire from Zhulu City. Other than the news that shook the entire southern forest, which even attracted the attention of many sects and forces, there was another piece of news that only spread within the Red Dust Society. The second dragon head had died. The second dragon head, who was at the peak of the airborne realm and only one step away from the heavenly strength realm, was severely injured by a single slash after a secret meeting with Guan Zhaoshan at the Red Dust Tavern. The two sides then fought and almost tore down half of the tavern. In the end, Guan Zhaoshan paid the price of minor injuries to behead the second dragon head. The death of the second dragon head, who had been in charge of the Red Dust Society together with Taoist Red Dust, was a big deal. After all, Taoist Red Dust was only half a step away from the Kongming realm. He had been in seclusion for many years, so the second dragon head was basically in charge of all the affairs of the Red Dust Society. The former Supreme Dragon Head had become an existence used by the Red Dust Society to intimidate other forces. The second Dragon Head was more like the president of the Red Dust Society. After several purges, there were actually more people who were loyal to the second Dragon Head than to Taoist Red Dust. There was no lack of secret meetings and declarations in the Red Dust Society to punish Guan Zhaoshan. However, to the surprise of the Southern Lulan Society, Guan Zhaoshan, who killed the second Dragon Head, was not promoted according to the rules of the Lulan Society, nor was he punished by the Red Dust Society. Instead, he continued to stay at the Red Dust Tavern as if he was an outsider. The Red Dust Society of Zhulu City did not do anything at all. It was as if the one who died was not their second dragon head, but an unrelated stranger. In truth, Lin Yuan's identity was also a secret in the Red Dust Society. Other than the members of the Red Dust Society of Zhulu City, who came into contact with Lin Yuan, only Taoist Red Dust and the second dragon head knew about him. The other members of the Red Dust Society really thought that Guan Zhaoshan was one of them. All of the clamor came to an abrupt end when the news of the second dragon head's death reached Taoist Red Dust's ears. That was because the Supreme Dragon Head, who had become a weapon of deterrence instead of a living person, had only said one thing: "It's good that he's dead." All of the clamor came to an abrupt end. Now that the second dragon head was dead, Taoist Red Dust naturally had the final say in the Red Dust Society. What else could they say if their boss said it was good that the second dragon head had died? They could not go against the grim demon and old Ding, who had been in the limelight recently, for the sake of a dead man, could they? Of course, there were still people who wanted to avenge the second dragon head. However, the saying that the tea cooled down after the person left did not happen to everyone. Even the Lulin Society, which was an incomparably filthy existence behind the scenes, had no lack of loyal and righteous people. It was just that in this circle, evil people occupied the majority. However, before these people could complete their secret plans, most of them disappeared without a trace. Those who remained were scared out of their wits. They packed up their valuables and fled to the Azure River Dynasty, not daring to stay in the Red Dust Society's territory any longer. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Supreme Dragon Head wanted to reclaim his authority and began to clean up the cultivators who were loyal to the second Dragon Head. Chapter 779. The next day, early in the morning, it's the fifth day. Lin Yuan ended his cross-legged state of cultivation and let out a long sigh. His cultivation had reached level 3 of the airborne realm. For an ordinary person who had just embarked on the path of cultivation, such a speed was terrifying. Even someone as powerful as Lin Yuan had to turn into a lemon spirit again. How many attribute points would a full cycle of demonic power in his body add without the green leaf water lotus? It didn't even reach 1 point. How many attribute points would a full cycle of spiritual qi in Guan Zhaoshan's body add? In the beginning, he was not used to the meridians of the human body, adding 1 to 3 attribute points per cycle. After getting used to the purifying haze of the human body, the speed of the cycle became faster, adding 5 to 8 attribute points per cycle. In other words, even if this body were to just sit cross-legged and cultivate, the efficiency would be comparable to the attribute points Lin Yuan's original body gained from fighting bloody battles back when he was at the Wisdom Realm. In 4 days, he went from an ordinary person to level 3 of the Airborne Realm, which was what cultivators called the peak of the early phase of the Airborne Realm. If such a speed of cultivation were to spread, others would not think of him as a monster. They would think that he was the reincarnation of some powerful being who came to Zhulu City and found something left behind in his previous life, making rapid progress from there. There would be olive branches, but there would also be greedy covetousness. Lin Yuan did not have such a hidden danger before, because he was lucky to get a tiger's skin. Forces at the level of the ancient demon court had been wiped out in the long river of history, but their power was still there. Even someone as powerful as the guardian of the celestial gate dared not offend them. Therefore, those greedy people only dared to dream about it. Moreover, the heritage left behind by monsters might not be suitable for humans. However, Guan Zhaoshan's body was different. He could not say that this body was also the successor of the ancient demon court, could he? Even if he said that and people believed him, it would not stop those people who were blinded by greed. Who would not want an opportunity that could make one's cultivation soar? It was especially so for those old people who would never let go of such a fat piece of meat like Guan Zhaoshan. That was probably the trouble of being happy. If one's cultivation rose too quickly, it would attract countless people who did not know what was good for them. For example, get out here. Lin Yuan said indifferently. His white right hand was already on the hilt of Guan Shanshue's sword. For a bladesman, it was fundamental to not let the saber leave their body. For most fanatical bladesmen, the saber in their hands was more important than their lives. While Lin Yuan was not a true swordsman, being at the 3rd level of the airborne realm was not enough for him to be able to sleep soundly in Zhulu City without any worries. His strongest weapon was to feed Guan Shanshue with his blood aura day and night without using any of the system's skills. Your grim demon Guan Zhaoshan? Following a question that sounded like a statement, A slender white figure appeared in the room. Shua. Without any hesitation, Lin Yuan's Guan Shanxue slashed out. The difference between his own realm and the opponent's realm allowed him to know the specific effects of the opponent's attribute panel once the Eye of God was activated. Guan Shanxue did not have any special abilities and only had a few unorthodox martial arts. Even if he was an average airborne realm cultivator, or even an airborne realm cultivator with no future, he might not be able to make a breakthrough to the heavenly strength realm even if he died. A piece of trash that was not qualified to make Lin Yuan use his blade nurturing technique, but it was good to use him as a warm-up. You have a bad temper that doesn't match your pretty face. The man in white smiled and flipped his right hand. An iron folding fan appeared in his hand, and he casually went to meet Guan Shanxue. Clang. Sparks flew when the weapons collided. The man in white's face stiffened slightly. He looked at the iron folding fan, which was completely covered in frost, and the frost that began to spread to his right hand. He cried out, "A magic item?" Lin Yuan remained silent. He drew his sword and swung it again, going straight for the man's face. At this moment, Lin Yuan's face changed slightly. When Guan Shanxue was still 3 centimeters away from the man in white's face, he abruptly stopped the momentum of the sword. He tapped his foot and directly broke out of the window. His figure was as fast as a ghost. After a few breaths, Lin Yuan had already appeared in a mansion. Lin Yuan quickly walked into the study and tapped a bookshelf several times in a row according to the rhythm in his memory. Accompanied by a soft, crisp sound, a secret door opened from the ground not far away. Immediately, Lin Yuan stepped into it, and with another crisp sound of the secret door closing, his whole person was hidden in the darkness. This was a safe house. It was made by the embroidered uniform guards. Back then, Qin Yu, Zhao Guangchong, and the others were attached to the south to carry out the mission. Naturally, it was impossible for them to directly kill their way out in the south like Taishan. Before they left, the embroidered uniform guards quickly operated. Each Chiliarch bought mansions and built secret passages and shelters. Except for the parts that they were responsible for, the safe houses that the other Chiliarchies were responsible for were all kept secret. Even if Lin Yuan's enemies knew that he was hiding in the safe house, unless they could capture all the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for building the safe house, they could only try their luck. Of course, capturing them was one thing. If they hoped that the embroidered uniform guards created by Lin Yuan would betray him, they would have to rely on the taboo mind control ability. A simple interrogation by torture was meaningless. Moreover, the underground shelter of the safe house also needed to be opened according to a specific rhythm. If the rhythm was wrong, then the entrance would be directly blown up. Not only would it waste time to clean it up, but it would also give a warning to those hiding underground. At the same time, there were secret passages leading to other shelters and secret exits underground, including food, water, and other preparations. It was almost to the extreme of caution. However, Lin Yuan didn't expect that when Qin Yu and the others were in the south, they didn't use the safe house. After it was built, it had always been in an abandoned state. Except for the embroidered uniform guards who lurked in the south occasionally coming back to exchange information and clean up, these safe houses were basically not used. It could be said that since the safe house was built, the first person to use the underground shelter was actually Lin Yuan himself, who was in charge of the northern frontier remotely controlling the overall situation. After a cup of tea. Endless sea, Willow Stone Sea. Your summoning disrupted my plan. I need a reasonable explanation. Lin Yuan's main body slowly opened his eyes, looked at the puppet body that released him, and said coldly. Although the other party was just a strand of divine sense, other than not being able to exert 100% of its strength, it was almost no different from him. Logically speaking, if nothing major happened, it would not release its main body and use divine sense to communicate with him to call him back. Chapter 780. The puppet maintained its cold appearance and said indifferently, "What you're worried about didn't happen. However, the higher-ups of the Sea Demon Guild that you asked Cyrus to contact arrived at the Willow Stone region yesterday. He's probably an ancestral demon powerhouse and could tell that I'm just a clone at a glance. He also told me that if you're sincere about cooperating, you should use your real body to communicate with him instead of using a clone to brush him off. That's all? Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly as he resisted the urge to curse. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was also him, he would have killed him. The white-robed man from before was most likely not from an aristocratic family or sect. After all, Guan Zhaoshen's resume was there, and the Flying Star sect was obviously standing on the opposite side. Even if Guan Zhaoshen's aptitude was noticed, those sects would have to think twice whether they coveted those rumored treasures, inheritances, or simply wanted to accept Guan Zhaoshen as their disciple. The Flying Star sect was not to be trifled with. A Kongming realm ancestor, 3 half-step Kongming realm elders, and a sect master who could break through to the Kongming realm at any time. This did not include the hidden forces that might exist. Just on paper, their strength was so strong. Without a certain foundation, they would not dare to come into contact with the hot potato that was Guan Zhaoshen. Even if they did come into contact, the person who came should have a high status in the sect. If they were not sincere, they would not have gained Guan Zhaoshen's trust, let alone the Flying Star sect. As for the white-robed man, whether it was in terms of strength or cultivation method, they could be said to be trash among trash. It was even inferior to the mental cultivation method that came with the third-rate martial arts, the Thousand Mountain Saber technique. This mental cultivation method was, after all, a way to circulate qi to support the saber technique. It was not impossible to use it for cultivation, but breaking through to the Heaven Star realm was the limit. A sect that could nurture a Kongming realm cultivator, even an outer disciple, would not cultivate such a low-level cultivation method. A sect of that level would not send a servant disciple to come in contact with someone like Guan Zhaoshen, who could stir up a storm in the south, right? Therefore, that guy was most likely a Lulin cultivator. It was equivalent to giving attribute points and reputation to him. But because of such a small matter, he let him go just like that. He did not know if that guy would flee at the sight of him when he returned. This situation is special after all. Even if I wanted to explain, he probably wouldn't believe me. The puppet shrugged helplessly and shook its head. So, for the sake of that plan, I can only summon you back. Normally speaking, even if one had reached the ancestral demon realm, it was impossible for one's divine sense to be completely independent. That was because that was the authority of a god. As mentioned before, Lin Yuan built some temples of the Black Water Dragon King in the north and attached a wisp of his divine thoughts to the Dragon King sculptures in those temples. By listening to the prayers of believers and receiving incense offerings, these divine thoughts slowly grew. If the time was long enough, these divine thoughts could even break away from Lin Yuan and become an independent existence. At the current stage, it was impossible for these will to exist independently. However, after they returned to the main body and separated into different objects, they could barely become clones with the same memories and personality as Lin Yuan. However, they were not independent existences. Lin Yuan was still the main body and would not give birth to their own will. However, they all had the same way of thinking as Lin Yuan. Under various circumstances, they would make the same choice as Lin Yuan's main body. Therefore, Lin Yuan was at ease to leave Willow Rock Waters to it. He descended into Guan Zhaoshen's body and prepared to move around in the south. Because, in a sense, it was no different from Lin Yuan himself being in charge of the Lushur Sea area. It was just that it was an inferior product that couldn't do anything. Take me to see that guy. Lin Yuan spoke indifferently. The dissatisfaction in his tone had been restrained. Since he was already here, he might as well finish his business before leaving. He should be able to make it in time. However, the Siren Guild had yet to establish a new branch in Willow Rock Waters. After all, in a sense, the Siren Guild was only a loose guild system. Without absolute benefits, the Siren Guild's upper echelons could not even command their members at will. Therefore, they did not have much say. Want to establish a branch in different waters? If it were the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, they could just give the order and be done with it. However, even if the Siren Guild was not inferior to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, they still had to carefully manage their relationship with the rulers of the various waters. Only then could they proceed with establishing a branch. Some weak and remote rulers of the waters would definitely have to be thick-skinned and carefully curry favor with the Siren Guild to see if they could promote the development of the waters through the Siren Guild's branch. However, the Willow Rock Waters was a region with local specialties, a good geographical location, and decent strength. Naturally, the relationship between the two sides would have to be transferred. Therefore, when Lin Yuan's main body returned, the Siren Guild's upper echelon naturally had no reason to continue being pretentious. He quickly settled the matter at hand and appeared in front of Lin Yuan under Flood Dragon One's lead. Blackwater Dragon King, it's an honor to meet you at last. The Siren Guild's upper echelon, who looked like a crab boss, cupped his crab pincers at Lin Yuan and mimicked a human speech to Lin Yuan. However, due to the accent, the phrase, "It's an honor to meet you at last," sounded like, raise a dog, raise a dog." Letting out a long sigh, Lin Yuan resisted the urge to correct the other party's pronunciation. He said in a deep voice, "The reason I invited you here this time is that we, the Willow Rock Waters, wish to establish a deeper level of cooperation with the Siren Guild. We're not like the other waters that only allow your guild to establish a branch here and let everything run its own course. If this matter is successful, it will be greatly beneficial to both you and me. I still don't know what your guild's attitude is. The guild will definitely have no problem with establishing a branch. After all, this is our livelihood." The crab boss smiled and suddenly changed the topic. "However, since the Dragon King mentioned a deeper level of cooperation, I would like to ask the Dragon King to elaborate as this matter is beyond my authority. I need to know the details first before I can make my own judgment and send a message to the headquarters so that the management of the headquarters can convene a meeting to discuss this matter." A slippery crab. Lin Yuan quickly made a judgment. His position in the Wu Jinhai was very awkward. He had the dragon's bloodline in his body, but he was disliked by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. He did not join the evil dragon faction and instead wanted to form his own faction. Anyone who got involved with him at this time might have to face the wrath of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas in the future. Chapter 781. Under such circumstances, it was normal for the other party to decline when Lin Yuan proposed a deeper level of cooperation. If the crab boss agreed and could not wait to implement it, then Lin Yuan would feel guilty. However, time was limited and Lin Yuan was too lazy to use words. After briefly summarizing the idea of the trade city and the content of the cooperation with the Sea Demon Guild, he became silent and quietly waited for the crab boss' response. Large-scale shopping platform, trading center, auction house, logistics. The crab boss gently chewed on the terms of Lin Yuan's ideas, and his eyes lit up. The Sea Demon Guild was not a private property of any family or clan. Instead, it was a platform created by nearly 90% of the Sea Demon clans in the entire Endless Sea, except for the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. It included a series of jobs such as mercenaries and caravans. It tried its best to develop the abilities and value of each sea demon. Therefore, to be able to become a high level in such an organization, even if the crab boss appearance was the same as the character in the cartoon of Lin Yuan's previous life, he could not be a good-for-nothing. On the contrary, the crab boss was definitely more intelligent and capable than what he showed. Therefore, after listening to Lin Yuan's idea, the crab boss realized the huge profit in it. Once the trade city that Lin Yuan mentioned was built, the Willow Stone Sea area would quickly rise. Strength would not be able to restrict the development of the Willow Stone Sea area. Just like how the Sea Demon Guild had a huge power, each clan had a limited number of sea demons. Even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could not break this limit. However, the Dragon Clan's bloodline was noble, and their individual strength was much stronger than other sea demons. Under such a big environment, once Lin Yuan's resources became rich, even if his strength was average, it would not be a problem. As long as he was willing to spend money, not to mention hiring a large number of sea demons that wandered in the Endless Sea, even making the Sea Demon Guild listen to his orders was just a matter of whether he had enough money. However, there was a problem now. After realizing the benefits that Lin Yuan mentioned, the The first thought that came to Boss Crab's mind was whether he could follow Lin Yuan's train of thought and borrow the enormous power of the Siren Guild to build a trading city before Lin Yuan did. However, the thought only flashed through his mind, and he quickly threw it out of his mind. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, even a demon beast could not be underestimated. Keeping a trump card was always a natural instinct of creatures that lived in danger all year round. With the Black Water Dragon King's reputation in the Sky Martial continent, how could he possibly be so unguarded, sharing his thoughts one by one, and then allowing others to plagiarize and plagiarize? The answer was obviously no. Lin Yuan was definitely hiding some trump cards. The only reason he was willing to share his thoughts was because he didn't care that the Siren Guild was ahead of him in establishing a trade city. Why was he like this? It was because he had enough confidence. If the Siren Guild cooperated with him honestly, they could still get a mouthful of soup. However, if the Siren Guild tried to make Lin Yuan's thoughts into their own, then Lin Yuan would definitely have the ability to make them bleed. If that day really came, with Lin Yuan's special position in the Endless Sea, the Siren Guild would take action against him to vent their anger. They might even push the blame of plagiarizing Lin Yuan's thoughts onto him. Then again, even if they succeeded in plagiarizing, what benefits would it bring him? His position in the Siren Guild was not low, and there were many demon beasts waiting to be promoted. However, if he wanted to take a step forward, he would be restricted by his own strength. There was no possibility of that happening. If it did not help in raising his position, then what about the benefits? Obviously, there was none. With his wealth, not to mention taking a big bite out of it, he might not even be able to invest in it. Dragon King's thoughts are indeed good. Although I don't know much about business, after listening to you, I can feel that this matter is very promising. Unknowingly, the way Boss Crab addressed Lin Yuan had changed to a respectful form of address. Lin Yuan, who was sitting opposite Boss Xie, was slightly nervous. He was not a dragon that would come from all directions. Half of the reason why he was able to achieve what he had today was because of the rapid improvement brought by the system, and the other half was because of the various aptitudes and practical character that he had learned in his previous life. He was obviously not the same type as those who needed to use a cheat in terms of personality and charisma. Therefore, after this kind of respectful form of address, there would usually be a but or something similar. The cooperation with the Siren Guild should not be a problem. Judging from Boss Crab's attitude, he had given up on plagiarism and planned to take more benefits from Lin Yuan. The benefits that I can give to the Siren Guild have already been compromised to the limit. With all due respect, the only work that is suitable for the Siren Guild is logistics. I can give up the security of the mall and other projects, but it is already out of my own pocket. At the same time, out of trust in your guild, I will entrust the safety of myself, the mall, and the traders to you, isn't that right? Before Boss Crab could speak, Lin Yuan had already spoken first. Although it was not necessary for the Siren Guild to join in, it was better than nothing. Otherwise, if they did it alone, although they could not really pose a threat to him, they could indeed take away a part of the traffic. At the same time, it would make him feel disgusted. In addition, with the temperament of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, when the Great Old Ones were hanging over their heads, they would not do anything that would make both sides unhappy for the time being. However, once the trouble of the Great Old Ones was solved, they would definitely return to their old ways. At that time, the entire Endless Sea might be swept away. The City of Trade, which was rich with benefits, would naturally be on their hunting list. Although it was not that Lin Yuan could not guard the Endless Sea, it was indeed not necessary. If he tied himself to the Siren Guild and formed a community of interests, even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would have to think twice. If everything went well, and this matter was over, he would leave a spiritual clone to control the puppet body, which would be enough to deal with the daily affairs of the City of Trade. Well, Boss Crab smiled bitterly and clasped his fist. From a business point of view, the Dragon King has indeed given the Siren Guild enough face. He is even willing to give us the security work, which has exceeded my initial idea. However, from my point of view, looking at the delicious cake in front of me but not being able to take a bite, isn't it too cruel? Chapter 782. What do you mean? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and his body suddenly exuded a dangerous aura. Damn, I was too careless. I forgot that the Siren Guild is a free and loose organization. Even if it's not like the Men in Black organization in Detective Conan where almost all of its members are traitors, it's impossible to expect them to work together and push things in a good direction. When it's time to be calculative, when it's time to be selfish, it's time to be selfish. This guy must have seen the profits of the City of Trade and wanted to eat until his mouth was full of oil before bringing in the Siren Guild. As the saying goes, the King of Hell is easy to provoke, but the little demons are hard to deal with. With Boss Crab's current attitude, if Lin Yuan wasn't willing to pay, then he shouldn't expect to have a deep cooperation with the Siren Guild. But even if he was willing to pay, he couldn't deduct the benefits given to the Siren Guild. He had to use his own money to satisfy Boss Crab's appetite. Moreover, it must be a trade dividend and not a one-time expense. Isn't this using a blunt knife to cut his flesh? Dragon King, I'm afraid you misunderstood. I'm not asking for benefits from you. Boss Crab smiled bitterly and said softly when he saw Lin Yuan's aura suddenly become dangerous. The distracting thoughts in his mind were cleared once again. When the crab boss faced Lin Yuan, he had to face the facts. With Lin Yuan's strength, it might be difficult to kill him, but if he mobilized the entire force of the Willow Rock Waters, he wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. After all, if this cooperation didn't work out, he would have to report it to the higher-ups. Later on, the Siren Guild would definitely build a city of trade before Lin Yuan. Sooner or later, both sides would become mortal enemies. Lin Yuan only accelerated the process of this matter and also prevented the hidden danger of the City of Trade project leaking out. What I mean is, when the people from the headquarters come to formally discuss the cooperation with you, I hope you can appoint my people to be responsible for the construction of the Willow Rock Waters branch. In return, I will help you persuade the higher-ups of the Siren Guild to kill the idea of copying your idea of building a city of trade in the bud. In addition, the Brave Crab Tribe is the same as my tribe. We are both branches of the Crab Tribe, but we don't have much authority. If our cooperation is successful, I will propose for the Brave Crab Tribe in the next Crab Tribe meeting to increase the priority of the resources given to the Brave Crab Tribe. This can be considered as indirectly strengthening your strength. Boss Crab stood up and faced Lin Yuan. Then, he bowed slightly and said in a deep voice, I hope you will consider it carefully. Your new business model will inevitably cause some sea demon clans to imitate it. If you cooperate with our Sea Demon Guild, you can at least ensure that those Sea Demon clans who imitate you will not dare to go too far, right? Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Lin Yuan's idea was very profitable. Once this kind of business model, which had never been seen before in the Endless Sea, was launched, it would cause the other Sea Demon clans to imitate it and even suppress it. No matter what killing move Lin Yuan was hiding, it would still be troublesome. If the Siren Guild was the partner, they could indeed avoid this kind of trouble to the greatest extent. Moreover, after Lin Yuan joined hands with the Siren Guild, the credibility of both sides was far from what the other Sea Demon clans could compare to. This kind of project, even for the entire Siren Guild, was absolutely a high-quality project. Boss Crab wanted to seize this opportunity, and the other higher-ups of the Sea Guild would definitely not give it up easily. However, with Boss Crab's strength, he might not be able to compete with the other higher-ups of the Siren Guild. Thus, he could only inquire about Lin Yuan's words in advance and see if he could let this partner and investor appoint his people to be responsible for this matter. I will think about it. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and fell into silence again. Jiao Yi also returned to the reception room and ordered the crab boss, who was full of expectations, to leave. Although Lin Yuan was not a businessman, since he wanted to establish a city of commerce, he definitely had to pursue profits. Although Boss Crab had stated his conditions, who could be sure that the other higher-ups of the Siren Guild who came to contact him would have conditions worse than his? If worse came to worst, he could just directly bid. The higher-ups of the Siren Guild who wanted to be in charge of the Willowstone Sea branch could directly sit together and use their own methods to see who could make Lin Yuan lower his head and agree to appoint the other party to be responsible. As the investor, Lin Yuan still had this bit of face. He was not afraid that the Siren Guild would flip the table. As for the higher-ups of the Siren Guild deciding who would be responsible for this matter, that was even more of a joke. If Lin Yuan insisted on appointing someone to be responsible, could the Siren Guild force people to come over? Once both sides reached an agreement, the Siren Guild would have the qualifications to flip the table. After Boss Crab was sent away, Lin Yuan turned his head and looked at the puppet body standing in the shadows. He said indifferently, "I still have things to deal with on my side. Keep an eye on things here. The next time there is something so arrogant, just get rid of it. Once our idea is understood by the Siren Guild, there will be plenty of people who are willing to cooperate. They have no right to raise conditions with us." The puppet nodded imperceptibly and didn't say anything else. After an incense's time, in the underground shelter of Zhulu City, Guan Zhaoshan, who was controlled by Lin Yuan, slowly opened his eyes. A cold light bloomed as he walked toward the exit of the tunnel. He didn't try to hide it at all. When he came out, he broke a writing brush and left directly. A safe house was a one-time consumable item. No matter how well it was hidden, once it was used multiple times, it would be discovered by the eyes hidden in the dark. The reason he broke the brush earlier was to leave a mark to inform the embroidered uniform guards hiding in the south that this safe house had already been used once. Other than the daily concealment, all other activities would be abolished and carried out in other safe houses. As soon as he went out, Lin Yuan saw a familiar person through the eye of the god walking through the nearby streets with a woman in embroidered clothes. Who else could it be if it was not the person in white who ambushed him in the inn and was summoned by the divine sense clone? Lin Yuan was speechless. There was a saying that good words could not persuade a damned ghost. This guy ambushed him and was almost killed. Not only did he not run away in the middle of the night, but he also dared to walk around with a young lady in Zhulu City? How big of a king heart is this? Or, Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became strange. This guy actually did not realize the difference in strength between them. Did he think that Lin Yuan broke the window to escape because he was afraid? Chapter 783. Sister Wan, you don't have to worry about your father and the others. I went to the Red Dust Tavern not long ago, intending to meet the grim demon who has been in the limelight recently. Guess what? That woman is a soft-footed prawn. I took her down with just a few punches and kicks. If she didn't run away at the last moment, I would have already taken her head and given it to your father as a betrothal gift. Lin Yuan, who was following behind the man in white, could only remain silent as he listened to the shameless boasting of the man in white. However, the bulging veins on his forehead proved that Lin Yuan was not in a stable state at the moment. You took me down with just a few kicks and punches? Why don't you go to heaven? You can't even take 2 hits from me. The man in white's right hand was wrapped in a thick leather glove. It was obvious that his right hand, which had been injured by Guan Shingshue's cold blade, had not been healed yet. If the erosion of such cold power was not removed as soon as possible, losing a right hand would be considered a good outcome. If the cold poison entered the body, his cultivation would be lost, and his body would be worse than that of an ordinary person, turning him into a sickly invalid. If he were a member of a prominent clan or a disciple of a sect who went down the mountain to train, he would have known very well how terrifying such cold poison was. Once infected, he would have tried to get rid of it as soon as possible. However, the man in white only found a pair of gloves and was done with it. He went straight to the lady and bragged about his strength. He even treated Lin Yuan, who he was no match for, as a stepping stone to pursue his sweetheart. That should be the sad thing about the ignorance of low-level cultivators from the Greenwood Forest. As for why he dared to brag like that, it was because he thought that Lin Yuan was doomed that day. With his strength and age, he was barely considered a top fighter among the Greenwood Forest cultivators. However, he was definitely not the main force that came to challenge Lin Yuan today. Even someone at the peak of the airborne realm might have shown up in Zhulu City today to see if Lin Yuan was worthy of the nickname Grim Demon. In the face of such combat strength, Lin Yuan was destined to die, even if he was stronger than the man in white. As long as Lin Yuan was dead, there would be no witnesses. He said that he defeated Lin Yuan with a few punches and kicks, Who would dare to stand up and refute him? The white-clothed man, who was chatting with his sweetheart, did not notice that Lin Yuan, whose face was as cold as ice, had already placed his right hand on the hilt of his saber, silently standing in the path he had to pass. Although he didn't raise his head, his intuition as a cultivator told him that someone was blocking his path. The white-robed man's face suddenly turned ferocious. He turned his head and growled, "Are you King crazy? Haven't you heard that a good dog doesn't block the way? Do you know that I'm—" His voice stopped abruptly, because he had already turned his head and saw Guan Zhaoxin's delicate face. He suddenly remembered that Lin Yuan had almost split him into two halves from his face with the knife. It was still okay when he was facing the saber. After all, at the critical moment of death, other than the fear of death, he was only left with illusions like a merry-go-round lantern. He completely forgot to dodge or beg for mercy, even though he couldn't do one of these two things, and even if he did, it wouldn't have any effect. But when Lin Yuan's expression suddenly changed and he broke out of the window, he discovered that he had not died. When he recalled that slash again, an endless sense of fear surged up. Because of this, he returned to the inn he was staying at. After bathing 3 times and changing 2 sets of clothes, he still felt that there was a stench on his body. With great difficulty, he overcame his psychological barrier and accompanied the sweetheart he had always pursued to go shopping. He had originally planned on boasting about his strength and winning the favor of his sweetheart. But when he turned his head, that killing god appeared in front of him again, like an emissary of hell who had forgotten to reap souls and had returned. Lin Yuan did not speak, nor did he draw his saber. He just stared at him with a cold face. In an instant, the legs of the man in white began to tremble. A familiar feeling surged again. A moment later, his sweetheart next to him covered her nose with her hand. Her face revealed an expression of disbelief. However, this was not important. What was important was that the god of death standing in front of him also revealed an undetectable look of disdain. Lin Yuan suddenly did not want to kill this trash. He felt that it would dirty his saber. The killing intent emitted from his body was slightly restrained. The man in white's face suddenly showed joy. He made a prompt decision to grab his sweetheart who was not too far away from him, and then pushed him hard towards Lin Yuan. At the same time, he flew back and shouted loudly, "His father is the chief of the Ganyu 36 Road Chain Stockade. He is one of the masters who came to kill you. If you want to kill him, kill him. Don't chase me." Lin Yuan? "TSK, there's something wrong with this style of yours, brother." His sweetheart was slightly stunned. Clearly, she did not expect that the bootlicker who had been thinking of ways to please her would not hesitate to wet his pants in the face of danger. Then, he pushed her out to block the saber. Then, she thought of the purpose of her father's journey from Ganyu to Deer City this time. It seemed to be a crusade against grim demon Guan Zhaoxin. Then, this handsome young man with delicate features in front of her was the legendary grim demon who was killed by thousands of people in 3 heavens? Gulp. His sweetheart swallowed a mouthful of saliva and instantly lowered her head. She did not dare to look at Lin Yuan. At the same time, she called out in a soft and sweet voice, "Young hero Guan." Goody. Lin Yuan had goosebumps all over his body. Looking at the cold and indifferent woman who was with the man in white before changing in front of him, he could not help but think of a popular saying in his previous life, "Green tea and a dog will last forever." He seemed to have somehow ruined the relationship between a pair of God's chosen couple. The next moment, Lin, man of steel, Yuan's expression changed slightly. He growled, "Scram." An ant who had not even stepped into the threshold of cultivation was even worse than the trash who had just escaped. He was not even interested in raising his saber. Such trash wanted to pretend to be a tea master in front of him? What a waste of time. Women will only affect my speed of drawing my saber. Crawl for me. On the other hand, the man in white who pushed his goddess out to block the saber didn't look guilty at all. Instead, he kept increasing his speed and flew in the direction of the Red Dust Inn. The passers-by who were disturbed along the way all greeted him warmly with all kinds of things related to his family tree system, ancestral tombs, and feng shui. Grim demon Guan Zhaoshan was afraid of the Lulin heroes, so he escaped from the Red Dust Inn and hid in Deer City to kill the disciples or descendants of the Lulin heroes who came to kill her. The daughter of the gang leader of Ganyu's 36 Roads chain village was killed by the grim demon. He was very satisfied with this script. He even began to imagine the scene of Guan Zhaoshan being attacked by the Lulin heroes and dying tragically. Just thinking about it made him angry. Chapter 784. 10 minutes later, outside the Red Dust Tavern, among the southern Greenwood cultivators who were greeting the shopkeeper and the manservants, a large man with thick eyebrows and a red face suddenly turned his head, just in time to see the white-robed man who was currently flying over. The sharp senses brought about by his cultivation in the airborne realm allowed him to immediately smell the stench of the man in white. He frowned subconsciously and growled, "What's going on, Songjie? Didn't you go to the market in Zhulu City with my daughter? Why did you come back alone? Where's my daughter? Also, why did you King wet your pants?" He asked 3 questions in a row, and his voice grew louder and louder. The last 3 words, "wet your pants," immediately attracted the attention of countless cultivators of the forest. It was okay to curse at members of the Red Dust Society at any time, but seeing a rookie with some reputation in the forest wet his pants was not something that could be seen all the time. After yelling, the man with thick eyebrows frowned slightly. I was too careless. Watching a new talent of the Lulin forest lose face had always been a part of the old senior's repertoire, so he had no qualms about it. However, after shouting, he remembered that this Song Jie was his daughter's suitor. Although he had not succeeded, everyone in the southern Lulin forest knew about him. If this kid lost face, wouldn't he lose face as well? After all, he was considered half a son-in-law. Seeing the group of cultivators of the forest looking at his crotch, Song Jie's face turned pale. Whether Guan Zhaoshan died or not, he had been utterly humiliated. In the future, he would not be able to hold his head up in the circle of cultivators in the south, let alone in the underworld. He was already decades old, and there was nothing wrong with him, yet he still wet his pants in the middle of the street. No matter who it was, they would be immediately killed. But then again, that old thing's daughter was most likely dead anyway, and there was no way he could enter the sect even if he wanted to. The foundation of the Ganyu 36 chain stronghold was definitely not going to be in his hands. He could just find a place to change his face and come back to the underworld. Right now, dealing with Guan Zhaoshan was the most important thing, and there was no need for him to act in a moment of anger. Thinking up to here, Song Jie's expression eased up a little, and he hissed, "Seniors, you must avenge Miss Zhao. That grim demon is inhumane." He was afraid of Senior's might and didn't dare accept the challenge. He hid in the residences of Zhulu City early in the morning and attempted to sneak an attack on the juniors of Seniors. Miss Zhao and I encountered Grim Demon. If it wasn't for Miss Zhao desperately hugging Grim Demon and buying time, I wouldn't have been able to escape from the jaws of death to inform Seniors. What? How dare you? Bastard! Kid, quickly lead the way and bring us to find that Grim Demon. The group of southern green forest cultivators didn't suspect anything. After all, they had gone straight to the Red Dust Inn after coming to Deer Chasing City. In the end, they didn't find Guan Zhaoshan at all. Thus, they stood outside the door and started cursing at the members of the Red Dust Society. If he didn't dare to accept the challenge, he should have said so earlier. Now that he had tricked them into coming to Zhulu City without showing himself, wasn't he just toying with them? Only Miss Zhao's father, the burly man with thick eyebrows, frowned. As the saying goes, no one knows a son better than his father. As a father, he was well aware of his daughter's temperament. Like a dragon, like a phoenix, like a phoenix. However, when it came to his daughter, she did not inherit any of the heroic and unrestrained spirit. Instead, she had inherited most of her mother's selfish personality. If she really encountered Grim Demon, his daughter would definitely turn and run. She wouldn't care about Song Jie at all. Why would she hug Grim Demon and risk her life to prevent him from chasing after Song Jie? This matter was very problematic. Zhao De Yong followed the flow of green forest cultivators. When he passed by Song Jie, he said coldly, "You better pray that my daughter isn't dead. Otherwise, no matter what happens to Guan Zhaoshan today, you will pay for my daughter's death with your life." Green forest cultivators had always been like this. They would do as they thought. Other than some established rules or existences with cultivation far stronger than them, they had nothing to fear. Just like now, Zhao Deyong was certain that his daughter's death had something to do with Song Jie. Then, Song Jie must pay for his daughter's death with his life. Because at this moment he was the strong one. Not to mention that Song Jie wasn't clean to begin with. Even if Song Jie was just an innocent bystander involved in this matter, as long as he was certain that Song Jie was related to this matter, he would become a punching bag for him to vent his anger on. At the same time, before the Lulin cultivators walked far, they saw Lin Yuan, who was dressed in white, strolling toward them. The silver-white Guan Shanxue was hung horizontally behind his waist. His temperament was otherworldly, which was completely different from the rough Lulin cultivators. He looked like a character who had walked out of a painting. Zhao Deyong stepped forward and growled, "Guan Zhaoshan, I won't say anything else today. I want you to pay for my daughter's death with your life." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Deyong rushed forward and arrived in front of Lin Yuan in a flash within a few breaths. Lin Yuan didn't move at all. He maintained his previous posture and walked forward confidently. It was as if he hadn't reacted yet, or as if he couldn't be bothered with Zhao Deyong. But just because Lin Yuan didn't move, it didn't mean that others didn't. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, sharp sounds of arrows piercing through the air were heard. Zhao Deyong's expression changed. He flipped his hands and slapped away the arrows that were shot at him. "How dare you, Red Dust Society!" Zhao Deyong, who had almost been plotted against, gritted his teeth and growled with a gloomy expression. The shopkeeper, who was also following behind the crowd to watch the show, suddenly changed his expression. He looked around and waved his hands. He kept explaining, "This really wasn't done by us, the Red Dust Society. There are rules in the Jianghu. How could we do something taboo?" It didn't matter if the Green Forest cultivators believed it or not. They were really wrong to put the blame on the Red Dust Society. Although the matter of Lin Yuan sweeping away the other Green Forest forces in Zhulu City had angered everyone, no one had the right to say anything publicly. After all, the Red Dust Society followed the Green Forest's rules. Just like this time, if the Green Forest forces wanted to deal with Lin Yuan, they could only give him a nickname first. Then, they could use this method to determine whether Lin Yuan was qualified to carry this nickname. Under such circumstances, Lin Yuan could either not accept the challenge. He would lose face and the Red Dust Society would lose resources. Normally, the Green Forest forces wouldn't allow newcomers to avoid a challenge. After all, they were cultivators that they had nurtured. Even if they were killed, it wouldn't be a big deal. The benefits they had received were real. In comparison, a genius was nothing. On the other hand, an existence like Lin Yuan couldn't be controlled by the Red Dust Society. Their orders were nothing to Lin Yuan. But if Lin Yuan wanted to accept the challenge, they couldn't use any tricks. Chapter 785. The rules of the Jianghu were the same as the laws of the northern frontier. They didn't strictly demand what kind of existence the greenwood cultivators were, but rather, they restrained them. Even if they did evil, they had to have a bottom line. For example, simple rules like, don't implicate family members were there, and very few people would violate them. It didn't mean that someone would come out to punish you for breaking these rules. It was just that since you broke the rules first, it was understandable that others would use the same method to deal with you. Going back and forth, it was bound to implicate some innocent people. If the matter was blown out of proportion, no one would have a good ending. Therefore, the Red Dust faction couldn't break the rules. After all, they were the target of public criticism. Once they angered the public and were accused of breaking the rules of the Jianghu, even a faction like the Red Dust faction would be destroyed in a day. T. A rather hot-tempered greenwood cultivator cursed, growling, "Right now, all of the branches established in Zhulu City have been swept clean. Your Red Dust Society is the most powerful here. There's no way we're plotting against ourselves and pushing the blame onto your Red Dust Society, right? We can't do such a despicable thing. The shopkeeper fell silent for a while. He thought to himself, maybe it's not your fault. After all, it was true that the Red Dust faction had taken over Zulu City's territory. They were a first-rate faction in the southern Greenwood. Once they occupied Zulu City for a long time, the gap between them and the other Greenwood factions would widen. Moreover, a genius like Guan Zhaoshan had joined them. To put it bluntly, if Zulu City was saved, the Red Dust faction would be the leader of the southern Greenwood factions for the next 100 years. Under such circumstances, it was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be Greenwood factions who didn't want to see the rise of the Red Dust faction use such a despicable method. Have we been in seclusion for so long that you've all forgotten that there's a mountain above us? A slightly feminine male voice sounded. A moment later, a young man with picturesque features, wearing a blue outer garment and a pink inner shirt, slowly appeared in front of the Greenwood cultivators. It has to be said that this enchanting young man is not inferior to Guan Zhaoshan in terms of appearance, but his strange accent and dressing always make people feel that there is a bit of femininity, subconsciously making people want to stay away from him. It is a sharp contrast with the elegant face of Lin Yuan, who was like a celestial in a painting. However, if they looked down on this person because of his appearance, they might not even know how they died. Southerners had a gentler temperament, which was different from Northerners who were unyielding and domineering. Even ordinary people were much wealthier than the people of the northern region in the past, so there were many busybodies in the southern region. There were all kinds of lists that listed heavenly talents and powerful people, such as the Green Cloud roll that recorded the young talents, the Hidden Dragon roll that recorded the hidden experts, and so on. The monthly update of the list was a lucrative industry in the southern region. A thin booklet, if placed in the secular world, would be worth at least 5 taels of silver. As for the lists that had substance and introduced the characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses of various cultivators, there was a huge market in the cultivation world. Many southern cultivators fought for a place on the lists. Of course, the Greenwood faction in the south also had a list. It was called the Night Thieves Ranking, which listed the top 10,000 experts of the dark forces in the south. In addition to the various false and real introductions, it also recorded the rewards of each person. The difference between the top and bottom of the list was not based on strength, but the reward. It was similar to the wanted posters of pirates in the 3 popular manga in Lin Yuan's previous life. No one knew the name of this enchanting young man, but he was a playboy by nature and attracted both men and women. He had the nickname Lianhua. Like the Lianhua child in Lin Yuan's previous life, he was also proficient in all kinds of miscellaneous studies. However, his talent for learning everything was extremely terrifying. However, the difference in personality was completely different. The Lianhua child of the Tianwu continent was very seductive. He was ranked 1357 on the Night Thieves ranking. Don't think that this ranking was low. The number of southern cultivators of the Greenwood faction in the Shenwu dynasty was innumerable. Currently, there were at least 50 to 60 million of them. At their peak, they could even suppress the local authorities of the south and start a massacre in broad daylight. Not to mention, the Night Thieves ranking did not only include the Greenwood faction in the south. It included all kinds of people from the dark side. That Taoist Red Dust, who could suppress the other Greenwood faction, did not even have the qualifications to be on the list. For Lianhua to be able to be ranked in the top 1,500 out of 10,000 people, it could be seen how fierce his reputation was in the south. It's time to teach them a lesson. In a tea house by the street, a pair of twin brothers who were playing chess suddenly popped their heads out and echoed with a smile. The 2 brothers, Double Blade, Lu Qian and Lu Ming, who were ranked 1417 on the Night Thieves ranking, were born as conjoined twins. Later on, they were separated into 2 independent individuals by an expert. However, their minds were connected and they were extremely adept at joint attacks. The battle that made the 2 brothers famous was when they worked together to kill a cultivator in the middle stage of the airborne realm when they were still in the late stage of the mortal evolution realm. Now, the 2 brothers were already at the peak stage of the airborne realm. If they worked together, they might not be able to defeat a Heavenly Dipper realm cultivator, but it was more than enough for them to stall such a powerful person for a while and retreat safely. There were 3 people in a row, and all of them were famous people on the Night Thieves ranking. Clearly, such people were not people that the Red Dust faction could invite. This Guan Zhaoshan, who exactly was he? Many of the forest cultivators who were invited to help narrowed their eyes slightly. Their little abacus quickly pounded in their hearts, and they began to calculate the gains and losses. For the sake of this so-called friendship, was it really worth it to offend Guan Zhaoshan, a rising star who was destined to soar, and to offend 3 people who could be ranked in the top 1,500 of the Night Thieves ranking? This debt was not difficult to calculate. The moment Lian Hua and the others appeared, many forest cultivators had quietly left the group and hid in the shops on the street, pretending to be onlookers. Soon, more and more people came to their senses. There was no special relationship between Lian Hua and Double Blade. The 2 of them were even active in different areas in the male side. There was no interaction at all. However, at this moment, the fact that these 3 ruthless people had appeared at the same time to support Guan Zhaoshan was right there. Naturally, there was no need to say what this meant. There was a behemoth standing behind Guan Zhaoshan at the moment. At the very least, it was a behemoth that the airborne realm cultivators of the forest were unable to shake. Even if they were to break the rules, the fighters behind them would not have dared to say anything. This was because in the south, there was only one force that could gather 3 people on the Night Thieves ranking. The Ether Society. Chapter 786. The Red Dust Society was definitely at the top of the southern Greenwood Circle. The Red Dust Society, who was a half-step Kongming cultivator, had the power to challenge second-rate clans and sections. With such a power, even if there were new members of the Greenwood Society who wanted to find a backer, they would first consider the Red Dust Society, not the other Greenwood gangs. It was like a young man with potential who wanted to cultivate. If he had the ability, he would choose to join a well-known and powerful sect. As long as there was a choice, they would not choose to join those sects that were not as powerful. However, the Red Dust Society was only at the top of the Greenwood Society. In a one-on-one fight, they were stronger than other Greenwood forces, but they were not so strong that they made everyone despair. The general structure of the Southern Greenwood Society was similar to that of Zhulu City. Every clan had their own territory, and there were even grudges between the leaders. Overall, the other Greenwood forces were all potential allies when facing the Red Dust Society. The Southern Greenwood Society wanted to suppress the Red Dust Society. That was why Guan Zhaoshan made such a big fuss when he came out. That was because the Red Dust Society was already strong enough, and the other Greenwood forces did not want the Red Dust Society to become even stronger. Most of the cultivators who were willing to be bound by rules and discipline went to sects or the government. Only those who liked to be free and unrestrained would fall to the dark side of the world. Who would want to have a leader above them? However, the Red Dust Society had previously suppressed the Southern Greenwood Society, and Guan Zhaoshan had risen from nothing. Although it was not said explicitly, the current Red Dust Society had shown the momentum and ambition of swallowing the South. If they did not stop it, the Red Dust Society would definitely become the leader. It was not something they wanted to do at all. The Red Dust Society, who was a half-step Kongming cultivator before he went into seclusion, was easy to find, and there were certainly not many who were reckless enough to try to challenge him. Guan Zhaoshan, who was at most in the airborne realm, was undoubtedly the best target. Killing Guan Zhaoshan was equivalent to killing the Red Dust Society's chances of becoming stronger in the future. Who would have thought that Guan Zhaoshan would have something to do with the Ether Society? What level of power was the Ether? The Ether Society was an organization jointly established by the underworld forces of the Shenwu dynasty in the past. Even assassin organizations like the Sword Dancer and the Shadow Walker, which stood above the clouds, had a cooperative relationship with the Ether Society. It was not appropriate to call them vassals, but the Ether Society was definitely their biggest bounty mission provider. For assassin organizations like this that worked for money, as long as they could afford the price, they could even call the Ether Society daddy. 8 out of 10 of the other dark influences that had not reached the level of these two great assassin organizations were the minions of the Ether Society. To the Ether Society of the past, a mere circle of the southern forest was just an ant that could be wiped out with a flip of their hand. Recently, the Ether Association had not been having a good time. Their northern branch had been wiped out by the Demon the Arch Association, while their branch in the Central Plains had been wiped out by the Shenwu Dynasty and the Sky Demon. After suffering heavy losses, they could only retreat to the south to recuperate. But as the saying went, the tiger's might was still there even after its death. Putting aside the fact that the ferocious tiger, the Ether Society, was only heavily injured and was not on the verge of death, even if it had reached that stage, those interest groups in the south could not do anything about it. In troubled times, they could only survive in the cracks. To an organization like the Ether Society, the interest groups in the South did not even have the right to touch them. After merging with the remnants of the Central Plains, the Ether Society's power in the South had risen to another level. It was also one of the few first-rate influences that could compete with the Demon Sect, and was also willing to do so. If not for the intervention of these first-rate influences, the South might have completely fallen into the hands of the Demon Sect. And now, the Ether Society was standing on Guan Zhaoshan's side. Did that mean that the Ether Society wanted to recruit Guan Zhaoshan, or even absorb the entire Red Dust Society? To the Southern Forest, this was not good news. The Red Dust Society was a power that they could only contend against if they joined forces. If they were to join the Ether Society, how would they survive in the future? Would they really respect the Red Dust Society as their leader? Lin Yuan slowly released his right hand from the hilt of his blade. He turned his head and glanced at Lian Hua, who was following behind him. A hint of confusion flashed in his heterochromatic eyes. He said in a deep voice, "I don't seem to have contacted you. Then, who gave you the courage to meddle in my business?" Lian Hua did not respond to Lin Yuan's words. However, a series of gasps could be heard from all around them. Putting aside the fact that Lian Hua had the backing of the Ether Society, just her ranking on the thieves' chart was enough to make the cultivators in the south tremble in fear. This Guan Zhaoshan actually dared to use such a tone to question Lian Hua? Where did she come from? We've come on the president's orders. If you have anything you need to do in the south, you can tell us directly. Lian Hua narrowed her peach blossom eyes and smiled at Lin Yuan in a fawning manner. She did not expose Lin Yuan's identity because this was an order personally given by the president. However, this did not mean that they did not know what kind of terrifying existence lay beneath Guan Zhaoshan's skin. The Ether Society? The thieves' chart? They were all trash. Even if those in the top 10 of the thieves' chart were to come, they would only have the right to bow and bend their knees before this person. But you've disrupted my plans. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed. Guan Shanxue whizzed out from his waist. In an instant, the blade was placed on Lian Hua's shoulder. The cold blade pressed against Lian Hua's fair neck. He only needed to use a little more force and this valuable head would fall to the ground. In the face of the threat of death, Lian Hua still maintained a calm expression. She said indifferently, "The president has already instructed us to do this in advance. Therefore, when we came, we prepared a gift for you. In addition, the president asked me to tell you that the situation over there is not good. If you want to do something, it's not appropriate to slowly lay out your plans." As soon as she finished speaking, two cultivators in long gray robes appeared from the other end of the street. They each held a metal chain and led two humanoid creatures with disheveled hair. They slowly approached. "Is that the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother? I heard that he's a little genius. He's only 60 years old and he's already at the threshold of advancing to the Heaven Star border. As long as he takes that step, he'll be a top figure in the entire South. Why is he being led around like a dog?" A sharp-eyed cultivator pointed at one of the two humanoid creatures and exclaimed in disbelief. "Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother? What kind of genius is that? Look at the one beside him. That's a real ruthless person. Back then, he single-handedly overturned the 72 strongholds of the Black Cloud Mountain. After returning to the sect, he went into seclusion for 30 years. Then he leaped over the dragon gate and advanced to the heaven star border. He's known as the Flying Star Sect's first sword saint, Elder Lu Fangji. Soon, another voice rang out and called out the name of the other humanoid creature. Chapter 787. The reason why they were called humanoid creatures was because their current appearances were truly unsightly. Their robes were tattered, and there were dark brown bloodstains everywhere. Their hair was disheveled, and their faces were sallow and emaciated. If not for the fact that their facial features could still be seen, they probably would not have been recognized. However, before the Ether Association brought them out, they must have specially washed their faces so that others would recognize them and use this to humiliate the Flying Star Sect. The two of them relied entirely on their knees, waist, and elbows to barely crawl and keep up with the two Ether Association members who were holding the metal chains in front of them. This was because the tendons in their arms and legs had been cut. In addition to the injuries on their bodies, even if they still had their cultivation, they could only barely suppress their injuries. They could not even walk or fly. Describing them as dogs on a leash was the most apt way to describe their current state. This should have been specially processed by someone to achieve this effect. However, the people around them started discussing again. This is not right. Isn't this Guan Zhaoshan the eldest daughter of the first wife of the Guan family? Before this, I've never even heard of her being a cultivator. If Guan Zhaoshan has always been related to the Ether Association, then no matter how daring the Flying Star Sect was, they would not have directly killed the Guan family, right? Yes. But speaking of which, this Guan Zhaoshan looks really good. She looks like a fairy from a painting. Do you think she has that kind of relationship with the elusive president of the Ether Association? Slap. You dare to F***king hit me? So what if I hit you? If you want to die, don't drag us down with you. That's right. The Ether Association is a first-rate faction. Grassroots like you and I would not even know how we died if we talked about their president. So what if he hit you? I want to kill you too. The surroundings were in an uproar. This group of Greenwood cultivators basically couldn't say anything nice. However, they quickly realized that a faction at the level of the Ether Association wasn't something they could discuss. Moreover, an existence at the level of the Ether Association's president couldn't do something like offend a quasi-first-rate sect to death for a woman. This Guan Zhaoshan was also not someone they could discuss. Lian Hua frowned slightly and secretly memorized a few faces. Then she said in a flattering tone, "Our people have already surrounded the Flying Star Sect's mountain gate. Their disciples who went out to do business have all been captured by us. As long as you give the order now, the Flying Star Sect will immediately be wiped out." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding noise abruptly stopped. They were merely curious about Guan Zhaoshan's background. After all, he had led the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother and an elder who was known as the Sword Saint through the streets like dogs. His actions had greatly offended the Flying Star Sect. But now, good heavens, they're good heavens. This time, the Ether Society was no longer trying to save face for the Flying Star Sect. They were trying to wipe out the entire Flying Star Sect. Alright, I got it. You can leave now. If there's anything, I'll summon you. Lin Yuan waved his hand lightly and did not say anything else. He moved Guan Shanxue away from Lian Hua's shoulder and walked toward the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother and the Sword Saint elder who were crawling over like dogs. Although the development of the situation was not what he had expected. However, there was nothing he could do about it. When Li Zhong had rejected Zhang Xiu and his subordinates, Lin Yuan had sent Zhang Xiu to the south. Firstly, he wanted to set up a trap in the south. Secondly, he wanted to use Zhang Xiu's resentment to cooperate with the demon sect to give Lei Qiusheng a ruthless blow. However, he did not expect Lei Qiusheng to self-destruct so quickly. He had no reason to summon Zhang Xiu back, so he could only let him continue to develop freely in the south. However, no matter what flowed in Zhang Xiu's body was not blood, but the poison of the curse he had planted. He could control Zhang Xiu's life and death at any time, so Zhang Xiu could naturally sense his presence. Zhang Xiu had probably already sensed his presence when he had just descended into Guan Zhaoshan's body. However, he had not been able to find out who he was. Today, because of the summoning of his divine sense clone, he had used a safe house to temporarily hide. Naturally, he could not escape the eyes of the embroidered guards. The Ether Society had also heard the news and acted immediately. Mississippi. Miss Guan, I beg you, let me go. I was just blinded by greed for a moment. As long as you let me go, I'm willing to change. I can be your dog. When he walked up to the two of them, the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother looked unusually excited, as if he had seen his savior. It was obvious that the two of them did not have a good time in the hands of the Ether Society. Come to think of it, after all, those who could join the Ether Society were all outstanding figures in the world of darkness. There were countless perverts, lunatics, and mental patients. It would be strange if they could still be treated well after falling into the hands of this group of people. In order to curry favor with Lin Yuan, the Ether Society would torture them in every possible way, but would not let them die. In the short time that they had been captured and sent to Zhulu City, they had probably suffered inhumane torture no less than 10 times. Every time they were rescued, it would be another round of miserable reincarnation. Look at yourself. What do you think you are? Show me your aura. You are the chief disciple of the Flying Star Sect. You represent the Flying Star Sect. Isn't it just death? I don't believe that the Dogs Hit Ether Society would dare to destroy the Flying Star Sect and become enemies with all the sects in the South. It's just a mere first-rate faction. Even if they are more powerful, compared to the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother, the Sword Saint Elder's attitude was obviously colder. However, before he could finish his words, he stopped abruptly. Because Lin Yuan, who had bent down to face him, smiled faintly at him. Then, the dragon's might that had been compressed to the extreme exploded in the Sword Saint Elder's mind like a single-target spiritual attack. Although he was in the Heaven Star Border realm, he had just stepped into it not long ago. He was only at the first level of the Heaven Star Border realm. When he was in his peak state, he could easily crush Lin Yuan in a one-on-one battle, let alone in a spiritual battle. What he was facing was not just a level 8 Mountain Lord demonic beast, but an ancient god-level existence. PFFF. The Sword Saint Elder opened his mouth, as if he wanted to expose Lin Yuan's identity as not a human. After all, aura could be concealed, but once it was leaked, it would not be able to fool others. As someone who grew up in the cultivation world in the South, how could he not tell that the aura just now belonged to a dragon bloodline demonic beast? Chapter 788. However, before the Sword Saint Elder could finish his words, a silver-white long saber had already crushed his heart. Congratulations, host. You have killed a Heaven Star Realm Level 1 cultivator. You have gained 200 attribute points. The Southern Sects. That sounds impressive. I wonder how many sects will dare to raise their heads when this king's army comes down south. Lin Yuan's voice rang out slowly. It sounded like two pieces of jade colliding, crisp and pleasing to the ears. However, in the ears of the Flying Star Sect's eldest disciple, no matter how pleasant the words were, it was enough to send chills down his spine. This king? Army coming down south? Looking down on the sects. When these characteristics were put together, there was only one person in the entire Tianwu continent who could match up to them. The god of the northern frontier, the Black Water Dragon King, Lin Yuan. She was not Guan Zhaoshan, but Lin Yuan. No wonder his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. No wonder he had such a precious treasure. No wonder he could order the Red Dust Association around. No wonder he could cause the Ether Association, which had always been hidden in the dark, to come out. No wonder he could make someone like Lian Hua use a fawning tone. All the questions were answered at this moment. Fame was such a strange thing. When disaster befell, only those who were crowned as heroes would light up the hope of mankind. Guan Zhaoshan was a mystery that puzzled the entire southern cultivation world, but when it came to Lin Yuan, it would only make people feel that it was a matter of course. You just said that you're willing to be my dog? Lin Yuan pulled Guan Shanxue out of the Sword Saint Elder's chest and slowly squatted down in front of the Flying Star Sect's eldest disciple. Yes, I'm very willing to serve you. The Flying Star Sect's eldest disciple hurriedly nodded with a fervent look in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't understand what it meant to have a deity descend. He also didn't know that after a deity took over a body, they had to fulfill the last wish of the previous owner of the body. He also didn't know that the girl named Guan Zhaoshan hated him to the core. However, this was not important to the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother because they used to belong to the Shenwu dynasty. Now that the Shenwu dynasty had been destroyed, according to the rules of the Tianwu continent, the 7 empires would always be the 7 empires. The other empires were not allowed to occupy the territory of the Shenwu dynasty. They could only withdraw their troops and coldly watch as the land was filled with war until a new ruler was chosen and the 7th empire was established. However, looking at the former territories of the Shenwu dynasty, the Central Plains had the Sky Demon and the South had the Demon sect wreaking havoc. There was no one who was qualified to compete with the northern frontier. The 7th dynasty had already been decided. It could be said that Lin Yuan was a golden thigh. In addition, Lin Yuan's identity as a demonic beast made him unable to rule the human territory. He could only be the king behind the scenes. A suitable puppet had to be nurtured. However, once a puppet had been nurtured for a long time and cultivated its own strength, whether or not it was still a puppet was not up to Lin Yuan, the demonic beast, to decide. If Lin Yuan raised his arm and called for help, there would definitely be a swarm of followers. To the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother, this was a huge opportunity that had fallen right in front of him. If he could gain the favor of Lin Yuan, he would rather not be the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother. I do like to raise dogs, but I don't like useless dogs. Unfortunately, with your character, you are not even qualified to be my dog. In addition, your abilities in all aspects are not enough for me to tolerate the flaws in your character. As soon as he finished speaking, the expression on the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother's face instantly froze. The fanaticism in his eyes gradually subsided, and he revealed a panicked look. He opened his mouth to beg for mercy, but could only make "Bobby" sounds and miserable howls. With a flash of silver light, Lin Yuan threw away the half of his tongue that was stuck on Guan Shanxue. He immediately sheathed his saber and said in a joking tone, "Your current expression is so perfect. I think that a piece of trash like you who likes to treat others as cultivation furnaces should have seen this expression many times. It's either from the faces of those young girls or from the faces of their family members who want to protect them. You may have been numb to it, right? But have you ever thought that one day, you would show this kind of expression to someone stronger than you?" The Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother's expression was still distorted, but his eyes were slightly focused. What kind of joke was this? A demonic beast, a mere demonic beast, who would be called an evil creature if he walked out of the Hengduan mountain range, was actually lecturing him here? What do you think you are? A messenger of justice? I'm indeed not a messenger of justice. I'm just someone who was entrusted by someone. The face that used to belong to Guan Zhaoshan squeezed out a touch of bitterness. He murmured, "I thought that after being a demonic beast for a few years, I could be indifferent to everything. After coming to the south, I realized that I was wrong. I'm just used to the law of the jungle in this world. The phrase, 'human life is precious' has become a joke in my mind. I'm used to the rules of my previous life. Although I haven't become a saint, I still get angry when I see scum like you." The Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother didn't understand Lin Yuan's strange words. In fact, Lin Yuan wasn't saying it for him to hear. He was just expressing his feelings. Because he had just untied a knot in his heart. Was he still a human? In terms of his form of existence, Lin Yuan definitely couldn't be considered a human. But after all, he still had more than 20 years of his previous life stored in the depths of his soul. When he first came to this world, he also considered himself a human. But later, he really couldn't blend into the circle of human beings, so he started to become violent and domineering. When he first came to this world, he was also a guy who was willing to fight a cultivator in order to protect a human girl he didn't know. Although the result was that he brought a lot of trouble to himself, Lin Yuan didn't have much regret at that time. What he did later was just a protective camouflage produced by his biological instincts. His ego still thought that he was a human being. That was enough. Didn't what he did unconsciously reflect that? He wanted to break the shackles of the feudal dynasty and establish a new law in the northern frontier. He wanted to let ordinary people live a full life. He wanted to create a world where humans and demonic beasts could coexist. This was a knot in his heart. Today, after seeing the real scum, he would still be angry for no reason. He would still miss the prosperous and beautiful world of his previous life. He would still miss the time he spent with his family as a human. How should he put it? It was great that he didn't become a monster. The bitterness on his face gradually turned into a relieved smile. Lin Yuan slowly lifted Guan Shanxue up and said with a smile, "However, the existence of scum like you has made me more determined to clean up the remnants of the feudal system. This should be the greatest contribution you've made as a human being, right?" Chapter 789. As the blade fell, the memories that had been hidden by his original body surfaced one by one. The injury on his right hand had also obviously healed. Back then, Lin Yuan could not recall them no matter how hard he tried. This was because of one of the rules of the Descent of Gods. The original body would only give out the conditions for completing the mission, but not the details. Only by killing the person who deserved to die would the relevant memories be unlocked. He had thought that the Guan clan had protected his original body too well, but this was obviously a huge mistake. All the love, hate, gratitude, and grudges in this world could not be without reason. The system did not give out any missions because it could not interfere with such rules. After carefully recalling what the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother had said to his original body, as well as what the Flying Star sect had done in joining forces with Lei Qiuming to destroy the Guan clan, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. "Congratulations, host, for killing a level 10 Zephyr Realm cultivator. You have gained 20 attribute points." The system's notification rang out, waking Lin Yuan from his memories. It did not allow him to be affected by his original body's emotions. The members of the Ether Society had all gone into hiding. Those Greenwood's cultivators who had come out of admiration had also mostly dispersed by now. He even dared to kill the chief disciple and elder of the Flying Star sect. With the Ether Society backing him up, what was the difference between killing them and squashing ants? Those who remained were Song Jie, who was scared out of his wits, Zhao Deong, who was in a daze, and the Red Dustin's shopkeeper and a group of servants. After sheathing Guan Shanxue, who was still untainted by blood, Lin Yuan turned around and said in a deep voice, "Continue with what you promised me. If you do it well, the Red Dust Society will be the leader of the Greenwoods in the south." "That's what I said, sir." The shopkeeper and the servants all knelt on the ground. Why was the Red Dust Society willing to work for Lin Yuan? Was it really just because they wanted the profits from Zhulu City? Of course not. Although Zhulu City was a second-tier city in the south, it was only a better place to stay and a source of income for the Red Dust Guild. Whether it was there or not, it wouldn't make much of a difference. They worked for Lin Yuan because they were optimistic about Lin Yuan's future. They hoped that after Lin Yuan established the 7th dynasty in the future, the Red Dust Society's strength would not be further improved, but at least their heritage would not be cut off. However, a potential investment was a potential investment. No one would reject an immediate benefit. Zhulu City was nothing. If they wanted it, they could just grit their teeth and fight for it. However, right now, Lin Yuan was able to directly control the Ether Association and make such a promise. What did this mean? From today onwards, the Red Dust Society would be directly labeled as the Ether Society. Disregarding the distribution of benefits, from today onwards, no one would dare to say no to the Red Dust Society's matters. Even a first-rate faction might not want to try and see if they could withstand the Ether Society's wrath. As for you? Lin Yuan walked to Zhao Deyong's side and said expressionlessly, Your daughter hasn't even stepped through the threshold of cultivation. My blade has no interest in the blood of weaklings. Zhao Deyong's body trembled. The dazed look in his eyes slowly faded away and was replaced by a touch of joy. After 3 breaths, he knelt on the ground and slammed his forehead on the ground, shattering the tiles. At the same time, he roared loudly, "From today onwards, the Ganyu 36 Road Chain Stockade will follow Miss Guan's lead." While he was one of the few fighters in the southern Greenwoods, he knew very well that his aptitude was limited. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been rejected when he wanted to join a sect back then. Being able to reach the peak of the airborne realm was already the limit of what he could achieve in this lifetime. To him, going further was an extravagant hope. Being able to achieve what he had at that moment was already his limit. He might be a little shameless, but that did not stop him from wanting to rely on Guan Zhaoshan. If he could get her protection, the Ganyu 36 Roads Chain Stockade Village might not be able to become the boss of the southern Green Forest like the Red Dust Gang, but it would definitely be one of the top forces. It could be said that he had found a great backer for his daughter and those old brothers who worked together with her. Originally, it was because of the grudge of killing his daughter, but now that he knew that his daughter was not dead, Zhao Deyong naturally did not think so much. Lin Yuan was speechless. He paused his steps and turned his head to look at Zhao Deyong, whose forehead was on the ground. "Good guy, I'm King Good Guy. You don't have any psychological barriers at all when it comes to taking advantage of the situation?" After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan raised his right hand and said expressionlessly, "Got it. Go back and gather your men. I'll be making a big move soon. Whether or not you can fight for a future depends on whether you're willing to put your life on the line." Zhao Deyong's voice was as loud as a bell. He got up and strode away with a smile on his face. It was not until Lin Yuan walked in front of him that Song Jie, who was scared out of his wits, reacted. Before Lin Yuan could say anything, he knelt on the ground and said with a hoarse voice, He had only wanted to use the Greenwood cultivators to kill Guan Zhaoshan. After getting his revenge, he would change his face and go out into the world with a new identity. With his looks and cultivation, it was only a matter of time before he made a name for himself. But now, not only was Guan Zhaoshan alive, but she was also involved with the Ether Society. A Greenwood cultivator like him knew very well what level of existence the Ether Society was. Let alone changing his appearance and identity, even if he changed his appearance, the Ether Society would be able to easily find him. If Guan Zhaoshan insisted on killing him, he would not even be able to walk out of Zhulu City. PFFD. Song Jie's head fell to the ground as soon as the sound was heard. Congratulations to the host for killing a level 6 airborne realm cultivator. 8 attribute points gained. Do you think you have what it takes to be a dog? Lin Yuan's voice was heard indifferently. At the next moment, his tone turned cold as he hissed, "It's one thing for you to be shameless and distort the truth, but at the moment of life and death, you even used the woman you like to take the hit. Trash like you has no need to live. Furthermore, people who think they are smart don't end up well. From all aspects, you're worse than that scum from before. Who gave you the courage to be my dog?" He sheathed his blade and walked toward the Red Dust Inn. Because of the Ether Society's involvement, there was a slight change in the plan. While he had killed those who needed to be killed, it was still not enough. The attribute points he had accumulated were not enough for him to break through to the next level. However, the situation at the northern frontier was not looking good, and he needed to speed up. There was no need to rush things in the south anyway. Chapter 790. 2 days later. In the southern capital of the Shenwu dynasty, Chuha City, a figure covered in pitch-black armor sat in the courtyard. He raised his head and stared at the gigantic and demonic cherry blossom tree in front of him. He held a white porcelain wine flask and a wine cup in each hand as he poured himself a drink. However, no one saw that when he opened his mouth to drink, a pitch-black snake's tongue quietly flicked out from his mouth. "President, the Dragon King's identity has been confirmed. It's just that Lian Hua, who had met Lin Yuan once in Zhulu City, was currently kneeling on one knee behind the black-armored man. She had retracted all of her demonic aura and her handsome face was filled with hesitation. It's not up to you or me to tell Lord Dragon King what to do. Although I've disrupted the Dragon King's plans by sending all of you to Zulu City, it's also a form of goodwill. When it's time to use us, the Dragon King will naturally speak. If you wish to continue stirring things up behind my back, you can give it a try. Let's see if there's anyone in the entire South who can protect you. The black-armored man's back was facing Lianhua. His tone did not fluctuate at all, but he changed the topic and said indifferently, "However, I understand your intentions. Later, make a copy of the information on the demon cult that the various branches have sorted out and send it to the Dragon King." You're saying, the expression on Lianhua's face changed slightly. Before she could finish her sentence, she clenched her teeth and did not finish her sentence. Regardless of whether it was this president who controlled the entire situation or the Dragon King who dominated the northern frontier, their words and actions were not things that a mere member of the Ether Society like her could control. There were some things that she should be clear about. Doing unnecessary things and saying unnecessary words would only bring about a fatal disaster to oneself. After Lianhua bowed and left, the black-armored man slowly got up and walked to the cherry blossom tree with his hands behind his back. His voice was suffocatingly cold. "Lin Yuan, what exactly are you thinking about? First-rate wise people like to start from the overall situation and place their chess pieces. Only ignorant people will pay attention to the immediate interests. For the existence of Lin Yuan's character, the Hongshan Society is just a chess piece. When it is used at the right time, it should be regarded as an abandoned chess piece and abandoned directly. But now, Lin Yuan had publicly declared that he wanted the Red Dust Society to be branded as the Ether Society. He even wanted to hand over the entire southern forest to the Red Dust Society in the future. This meant that this chess piece still had value that could be exploited. Was it to gather the forces of the southern forest to fight against the devil cult? No, that was obviously impossible. The size of the Ether Society was obvious. Even if the demon sect had the Sky Demon behind them, they would not be able to threaten the Ether Society. If the Sky Demon mobilized a large number of people to the south to encircle and annihilate the Ether Association, the northern frontier would naturally also send troops to invade the Central Plains. However, if both sides disregarded the northern frontier, the demon sect's strength alone would at most be on par with the Ether Association. Not to mention, the various cultivation sects under the Heavenly Gate Guardians were also carrying out operations against the demon sect members. From the perspective of the big picture, although the demon sect was constantly encroaching on the south, it was only targeting the interest groups in the south led by Lei Qiuming. The first-rate sects and aristocratic families had actually been suppressing the demon sect all along. If Lin Yuan wanted to gather the forces of the south to fight against the demon sect, it would only take a word, and the Ether Association would immediately take action. At that time, not just the southern forest, but the entire dark world in the south would have to fight for Lin Yuan. The black-armored man reached out and lightly knocked twice on the cherry blossom tree. "What's the matter?" A somewhat languid voice sounded from above. Unknowingly, a slender figure dressed in black had crossed his arms in front of his chest and squinted his eyes as he leaned against the trunk of the cherry blossom tree. The branches under his feet did not move at all, as if this black-armored man had no weight at all. The black-armored man's facial features were ordinary, but he had a different kind of aura. He clearly looked no different from an ordinary person, but as long as you turned your head and did not look at him, you would completely forget what this face looked like in just 2 or 3 breaths. The 81st place on the Night Thieves leaderboard, Latent Shadow, Chen Ping. If he brought this head to the government to exchange for a bounty, he would have the resources to cultivate all the way to the Tiangang realm from an ordinary person's foundation. However, it was not as if there were no cases of bounty hunters killing or capturing the top 100 on the Night Thieves leaderboard. Even the top of the leaderboard had changed 3 times, but Chen Ping was still able to sit firmly in the 81st place. It could be seen that his methods were extraordinary. Have your people infiltrate the Red Dust Society. I want to know all the secrets of this organization in the shortest time possible. The black-armored man slowly withdrew his right hand. His tone was still gloomy and cold. Chen Ping pondered for a moment. Still squinting his eyes, he said in a languid tone, "There's nothing to investigate. The Red Dust Society is now in decline. Other than having a long inheritance, there's nothing worth paying attention to." If you look back 2,000 years ago, the Red Dust Society would be the strongest cultivation sect in this area. As for now, inheritance, long ago? The black-armored man was slightly startled. The dark green vertical pupils under the visor suddenly condensed as he gently chewed on these 4 words. "Yes, I've looked through all the ancient books of the Red Dust Society. According to the stories passed down orally or recorded internally 2,000 years ago, no, even longer ago, the Red Dust Society should be called the God Sculpting Sect. They cultivated cultivation methods from another world. More than one supreme realm expert had appeared in their sect. It is said that one of them was an amazing genius who touched the threshold of a higher realm. However, I've studied the cultivation methods and secret techniques of the Red Dust Society. Although many of them are different from the cultivation methods of other sects, it's a bit of a stretch to call them cultivation methods from another world. Moreover, most of the contents are messy and useless. If one cultivates according to the Red Dust Society's cultivation methods, half-step Kongming realm would be the limit. That Red Dust Taoist must have gone into seclusion because of the limitations of his cultivation method. However, there is another saying within the Red Dust Assembly. Their original cultivation method indeed came from another world, but with the passage of time, the laws of heaven and earth began to change, and some of the subtle and profound aspects could no longer be cultivated. Forcibly cultivating them would only lead to cultivation deviation. Therefore, with the efforts of generations of disciples, the Red Dust Assembly's cultivation method, soul sculpting art, was modified into the current Red Dust Scripture, an earth-step high-rank cultivation method. Chen Ping's tone was still languid, but with such a detailed description, it was obvious that when Chen Ping sneaked into the Red Dust Society to investigate this matter, his interest was also extremely high. God Sculpting Sect, God Sculpting Method. More than 2,000 years ago, what happened? The black-armored man raised his head and stared at Chen Ping, puzzled. This matter, the Red Dust Society should also have records, otherwise they wouldn't have changed their cultivation methods without any basis, right? Chapter 791. The rise of the God Sculpting Sect was due to that amazing genius who touched the threshold of the sovereign realm. Even if he hadn't broken through at that time, his strength could be said to be invincible in the sovereign realm. Now that we know of the Heavenly Gate's guardians, there are many who were defeated by him in the past. However, the decline of the God Sculpting Sect was also because of that amazing genius. After he defeated all the masters in the world, he suddenly said that, "The peak of the supremacy realm is not my fault." He also said to the higher-ups of the God Sculpting Sect that the God Sculpting technique they cultivated had a huge flaw. Therefore, even if they reached the end of this path, they would only reach the peak of the supremacy realm. After saying this, that genius went to the gate of heaven, saying that he wanted to find the source of the God Sculpting technique. He wanted to ask the existence who passed down this cultivation method, why he was not willing to pass down the complete cultivation method, and what was the missing part. Since then, that genius had never returned, and there was no longer any news of him. 400 years later, the God Sculpting Sect, which had lost that genius, but was still able to maintain its position as a first-rate force in the Sky Martial continent, suddenly held a funeral for an unknown person, causing the entire Sky Martial continent to know about it. Not long after, many people speculated that the genius who entered the gate of heaven to find the source of the cultivation method had fallen somewhere unknown. Therefore, the world fell into chaos, and those who had enmity with the God Sculpting Sect and coveted their resources all emerged. After a war that lasted for more than 130 years, the God Sculpting Sect was destroyed. The various assets under their name were divided among the various cultivation sects, and most of the ancient books and cultivation method collections were plundered. However, the disciples did not die, and had always been operating in the dark in the Sky Martial continent until more than 100 years ago, when the Red Dust Taoist appeared. He suppressed the other Lulan forces and single-handedly created the Red Dust Assembly. It's just that the current Red Dust Assembly is too weak, and their secret cultivation method is only SOSO. Those who had enmity with the God-sculpting sect have either been annihilated in the long river of history, or have become the gate of heaven's guardians. They have been too lazy to deal with the remnants of the God-sculpting sect. Of course, the reason why I know so much is because someone entrusted me to investigate the Red Dust Assembly. However, the other party felt that the Red Dust Assembly was not a threat, so they gave up. Otherwise, if you came looking for me today, I would have to go to the Red Dust Assembly to investigate this information. It may not be as detailed as the original investigation. Chen Ping's tone contained a bit of sadness, as if he was lamenting the fate of the God-sculpting sect. So that's how it is. I understand now. The black-armored man's expression changed as he gritted his teeth and muttered. After hearing these secrets from Chen Ping, he finally figured out why Lin Yuan would treat the Red Dust Society, which had been reduced to messing around in the southern forest, differently. What came from the other world wasn't just the cultivation methods passed down by those unknown almighty beings. Wasn't the reclusive ancient demon court also a force formed by living beings from another world? Wasn't the dragon clan of the Four Seas, the overlord of the Endless Sea, also a species from another world? As the inheritor of the ancient demon court, it was understandable that Lin Yuan knew about the other world, right? Then, there were only two paths at the moment. One was to watch Lin Yuan support the Red Dust Assembly, perfect their Red Dust scripture, and deduce it into the complete soul-sculpting chant. Then, they would watch the Red Dust Assembly soar, sweeping away the present southern sects and ether assemblies, and recreating an environment like the northern frontier. The other was to lower their heads and honestly work for Lin Yuan, helping him revive the Red Dust Assembly. In the future, the northern cultivation world would naturally be under the control of the Northern Frontier Academy. The Dark World had the Demon Emperor Association, and in the south, there might be a Southern Academy and an Ether Assembly that could compete with the Demon Emperor Association. At the same time, sitting cross-legged in the Red Dust Inn, Lin Yuan stretched out his hand to support his cheek, with a thoughtful look and murmured, "I thought the Red Dust Assembly was just a force with a long history. I didn't expect that there was such a big secret hidden in it." Although his realm hadn't reached that level, he had already embarked on the path of the totem ancient god. Lin Yuan couldn't reach the level of Hongjun, who could even feel a stranger's name, but if someone related to him called his name, he could still detect and observe it. He just wanted to give the Red Dust Assembly a sweet date. He didn't expect that the sensitive Zhang Xiu would give him such a big gift. The supreme being of the human clan and the ancestral demon of the demon clan, at this level, could be called a demigod existence. They had to cultivate a large number of believers to provide the power of incense. Only then could they take the last step in their limited lifespan and become a real god, comparable to the dragon gods of the dragon clan of the Four Seas, and the powerful beings of the heavenly gate who could suppress the dragon gods. Was there a flaw in the soul-sculpting chant? What was missing was this part. In fact, after stepping into the divine realm, one couldn't simply be described as a cultivation realm. Referring to the so-called immortal monarchs, immortal kings, and immortal emperors in the novels of his previous life, it would be more appropriate to call them the great divine powers and the weak divine powers in the Western divine system. At this level, one could move mountains and fill seas with a wave of their hand. They were immortal and indestructible. Even if the world was destroyed, the true God wouldn't fall. In the chaotic world, this step was the so-called Saint Realm. After becoming a true God, there were still differences in strength, but the strength came from having more believers and more power of incense. The power of a true God didn't have a limit. One strike would consume enough power of incense, and the world would be destroyed in an instant. But the upper limit was the upper limit. Without the power of incense, the true God was essentially an existence with one or two more attribute points than the supreme being and the ancestral demon. Why was Hongjun so strong? Because he was a saint. Whether it was Sanqing, Nuwa, or the so-called saints of the chaotic world, they were all his disciples. From the divine system's point of view, these people were his inferior gods. The power of incense they obtained was similar to how Badu had to pay tribute to Lin Yuan. It also had to be shared with Hongjun. The stronger these saints were, the stronger Hongjun would be. The disciples of the saints were actually cultivating believers for Hongjun. This was the truth of the chaotic world? The so-called power of merit was actually the power of incense. It was just that Hongjun had changed a set of words and made the entire chaotic world his employees. Therefore, since then no one could become a saint. Even existences like Nuwa who had become saints of merit could only become saints because the way of heaven was still way of heaven at that time and wasn't controlled by Hongjun. Strictly speaking, these saints couldn't defeat Hongjun and had to submit to him. That was why the following cultivation tribulations broke the chaotic world and caused many survivors of the chaotic world and a part of the origin of the way of heaven to flee. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.